Chapter 442. These soldiers were only temporarily deceived. She did not want to kill them all, so she was in a difficult position. Moreover, she specifically chose to attack their wrists to make them lose their ability to fight, which greatly increased the difficulty of escaping. Really aggrieved, Lu Jin chased after her and shouted, "Don't let the assassin take General Bai away." With his order, everyone thought that Gong Yimo was plotting against Bai Ji, and they were all indebted to Bai Ji, so they were even more ruthless. Gong Yimo had no choice but to be more ruthless. When she really had to kill someone, she would definitely not be lenient. How could she be the opponent of so many people by herself? So she fought while retreating. Fortunately, those people were afraid of Bai Ji in her hands, so they were a little hesitant. Seeing that Gong Yimo was really going to escape, Lu Jin could not care so much anymore and shouted, "Quickly kill her! General Bai is not moving. Obviously, he has been killed by her. Don't let her take General Bai's body away. That will be the disgrace of our Dragon City camp." When those soldiers heard, Gong Yimo actually killed General Bai, their eyes turned red, and Gong Yimo was surrounded by enemies, so she did not have time to explain. After all, Bai Ji was really unconscious. Flesh and blood splattered. She saw that Bai Chio actually ran over. Was he trying to help or cause more trouble? In this crisis, she threw Bai Ji on him and blocked all the blades by herself. "Take him away. I will cover the rear." But Bai Chio held his father, hesitating. "Get lost." Gong Yimo was anxious. She only had time to reply with a word. Bai Chio's eyes turned red, and he really retreated with Bai Ji, with one less person on her back. Even if there were thousands of soldiers and horses in front of her, she was not afraid at all. Wasn't it just covering 2 people? It's been a long time since I exercised my muscles. Gong Yimo twisted her neck. "Come, kill her." "What should we do, Prince? It's a dead end in front." Little Seven looked behind him nervously. The so-called iron horses and golden spears were nothing more than this. Even the thunder could not suppress the sound of the horses' hooves. Wave after wave, it was as if they were trampling on their hearts. Gong Dai calmly stared at the mountain in front of him, and a 3-dimensional image immediately appeared in his mind. Although he had never tried this before, he had never forgotten what the royal sister had taught him. "Prince!" Little Seven shouted anxiously. In the next second, Gong Dai flew up and did something that they couldn't understand. Boom! Even the earth seemed to be trembling. Gong Che had originally thought that it was a sudden clap of thunder, but this tremor was not something that could be caused by lightning. In an instant, a thought flashed through his mind. It was unbelievable. It was actually Lei Feng. He ran forward like a madman. Never in his wildest dreams would he have thought that Gong Yimo would hand her virginity to Gong Dai. Gong Dai's subordinates were also frightened by this earth-shattering sound. Dust flew everywhere and hit their bodies, but they didn't feel any pain. They still stared ahead without blinking, thinking in their hearts, was this the legendary weapon that the princess could use to break mountains and rivers? No wonder even the emperor wanted it, to be able to blow up a mountain in an instant. This kind of thing, they also wanted it. But this wasn't the end. Gong Dai didn't just want to blow up the mountain. He wanted to blow it through. The continuous loud sounds shook everyone's hearts. Many people behind Gong Che didn't know what was going on, but towards the unknown, they showed fear. Even the horses under them didn't want to continue forward, but they were driven by the whip and couldn't retreat. Finally, with a final loud explosion, a triangular hole was blasted out along the mountain wall. Gong Dai didn't hesitate and flew up onto the horse. "Let's go." The others were still in a dream. Such a big wall blocked the way, but the prince only needed to use a few moves to dig out such a big hole. This was already not something that could be done by human strength. This was divine strength. So they passed through the mountain like they were in a dream, and then they saw Gong Dai do it again. Anyone who knew about explosives knew that the angle was very important, and it involved a lot of physical skills. Gong Dai didn't expect that all the things he had learned in the past could be used. And when Gong Che came, this was the scene he saw. The road was blown up, and Gong Dai stood alone on the opposite side of the tunnel, the rain falling. Gong Che looked at him with eyes wide open. "Why?" He shouted like a wild beast. Why is she so biased? Shit, the thing that Gong Yimo treasured as her life, she actually gave it to Gong Dai. Why? Gong Dai smiled slightly, and at this time, Gong Che reacted, frantically leading people to chase after him. But only a loud sound was heard. The horses neighed in unison as Gong Che was protected by Mu Yu with all her might. Then, all of them watched helplessly as the mountain that had been blasted apart collapsed once again, blocking the passage from before. They couldn't pass at all. Gong Dai. Gong Dai. At this time, there was still a buzzing in his ears. Gong Che pushed Mu Yu away and looked around. Debris kept falling on his body, but he didn't feel any pain. He braved the rain, his eyes red, looking for Gong Dai. But how could he find him? A broken wall blocked his way, separating him and Gong Dai into two different worlds. In the next second, a person stood tall on the broken wall, mixed with the rain. Gong Che couldn't see his face clearly, but he knew who he was. Gong Che. Gong Dai's voice came softly, with a hint of mockery. Why? The moment Gong Che heard his voice, he was instantly enraged. He looked up and questioned him. What right do you have? What right do you have? What right did Gong Yimo give you something more important than her life, and not me? Why? He still remembered how much Mo had suffered in order to protect this thing, but she had given it to Gong Dai. Gong Dai naturally knew what he meant. In the rain, his laughter sounded like a sound with a trace of malice. What right do I have? Because she loves me. Everyone behind Gong Che didn't know what was going on, but they saw that Gong Che had lost his soul because of King Chi's words. You must be happy beating me up, taking my military power, damaging my bank, and even chasing me out of the capital. Are you happy? Gong Dai was very evil. He used the most vicious words to provoke Gong Che, completely crushing him mentally. No, it wasn't like that. Beating him up and forcing him to leave the capital. Gong Che knew very well that Gong Dai wanted to leave, so he allowed him to suppress him. He damaged Gong Dai's bank, but Gong Dai burned the fleet, and his losses were even greater. As for the military power, Gong Che was so angry that his whole body was trembling. No wonder Gong Dai had handed it over so easily, and only took away 3,000 men. He had obtained with only 3,000 men, he could create a terrifying army comparable to 100,000 soldiers. He couldn't defeat Gong Dai at all. Chapter 443. This thought made Gong Che disheartened. For so many years, he always thought that Gong Dai was on par with him. Even when Gong Dai did not fight back, he let down his guard and thought that Gong Dai was only SOSO. But today, he knew how terrifying Gong Dai was. If he did not have a weapon in his hands, he could also retreat easily. What a joke. He treated him as an opponent, but the other party did not care about him at all. Was there anything more humiliating than this? I'm going to kill you. Gong Dai, I'm going to kill you. This person was definitely his biggest obstacle, no matter in which aspect. Kill him? Gong Dai smiled. Rainwater flowed from his lips to his chin. His tone was quiet, but it was so dangerous that it made people tremble. You should be glad. He smiled like a demon, but his face was as beautiful as a fairy. If it wasn't for her, I think I would be happy to use your body to test this weapon. At that moment, in this potholed rainy ground, one was on top, one was on the bottom. It was very close, but also very far. There was a gap in between. It was a fight to the death. Gong Yimo's hands gradually weakened. This could not go on. There were too many people on the other side. They were like maggots attached to bones. It was annoying, especially when they were covering two people. It made people even more anxious. Gong Yimo, be careful. Baichio saw a cold knife in the dark. With Baichio's reminder, Gong Yimo avoided it. Her heart was burning with anger. She killed a gap and used her inner strength to transmit her voice. I'll say it again. I'm here to save Bai Ji. Lu Jin tried to kill Bai Ji. You're helping the evildoer. Many people hesitated, but Lu Jin was not someone to be trifled with. He immediately shouted, General Bai is my adoptive father. He treated me well. Now that my adoptive father died in the hands of this traitor who pretended to be a princess, She must want to take my adoptive father's corpse to claim credit. You must let her blood splatter on the spot. The soldiers' eyes were red. At this moment, they naturally believed Lu Jin, so they charged over. Gong Yimo was truly enraged. In the next moment, her murderous aura seemed to have solidified. At first, she still held back, but since these people didn't know what was good for them, she might as well just kill them. Many people who were near were intimidated by Gong Yimo's soaring, killing intent. Even the swords in their hands began to tremble. However, military orders were absolute and they could not retreat. Sorry, Gong Yimo's eyes flashed with a bloody light. She was like an Azura. Not only did she stop retreating, she raised her saber and charged forward. Her sudden approach caused many people to retreat. Kill her. Lu Jin was afraid of Gong Yimo and hid far away. But this time, Gong Yimo did not show any mercy. Under the moonlight, she was like a blade fairy. Her gorgeous palace dress was dyed red with blood. She had a demonic beauty. Just one look, and it would be etched in a lifetime. Bai Chio knew that now was not the time to run away. If it was any other time, even if he had to carry his father on his back, he would still go back and help her. But her awe-inspiring manner made him understand that even if he went back, he would only be a burden. So for the first time in his life, he suppressed his impulse and escaped with Bai Ji. Gong Yimo's massacre was very shocking. She killed in and out of the troops alone with her saber. She was like a human weapon. Military advisor Lu was finally afraid. Let's retreat. She is too scary. We're no match for her. He was already scared out of his wits. Lu Jin pushed him away. His eyes were about to pop out. Why should we retreat? If she doesn't die today, we will be the ones to die in the future. Gong Yimo was in the middle of a bloody battle. She could not hear or see clearly. She seemed to have mastered the rhythm of killing. Every time her sword drew blood, there was the beauty of death. Finally, when she killed nearly 100 people in an instant, all the soldiers were afraid. They hesitated and did not dare to move forward. Was this person even human? In just a short while, the ground was already full of corpses. The moon was as bright as day, illuminating the corpses on the ground. Gong Yimo stood among them. When the wind blew, her whole body was stained with blood. But she was like a celestial being flying in the sky. She was definitely injured, but she did not care. She was the kind of person who would lose all sense of pain once she started killing. Just like now, there was a dagger at her waist. She took it out in front of everyone and casually threw it on the ground. It made a deep sound. Everyone's heart seemed to have fallen to the bottom of a valley in an instant. Her murderous aura condensed. It seemed that every time she killed someone, the sin of killing on her body would get heavier and heavier. When she swept her gaze, no one dared to look at her. They only felt that she was a god, invincible. As for them, they were just throwing eggs at a rock. They were just courting death. Still want to play? She flung the blood on her sword. That cold voice made everyone retreat again and again. When Lu Jin saw that those people were afraid of being killed, he also became timid. Go, kill her, kill this demoness. Gong Yimo smiled. It was really a title that she had not heard for a long time. In this life, she wanted to be a saint. She heard a lot of gratitude, but in her previous life, she was always a demoness. When she smiled, a wind rose from the ground. It seemed to spiral with her as the center. The soldiers felt that the wind was like a blade. They were shocked and kept retreating. It's just a corpse. Are you sure you want to add more casualties for a corpse? Her light words made people's hearts waver. Her eyes flashed with a bloodthirsty light, adding more fuel to the fire. It's okay. If you want to die, I don't mind sending you on your way. As soon as she finished speaking, the inner strength transformed into a violent wind whistled. They had never heard of such a high level of skill. They only felt that it was as if a deity had descended to the world. Finally, when the biting cold wind cut through their clothes, it also seemed to have broken their last line of defense. Everyone retreated. Monster! She must be a monster. After fighting for so long and suffering so many casualties, she seemed to be fine. She could even use inner strength to transform her body. Could she be an old monster from the legends? Gong Yimo smiled and took a step forward. Those people took a step back. No matter how much Lu Jin scolded them from behind, they held their blades and did not dare to take a step forward. Gong Yimo walked forward calmly. The smell of blood on her body was oppressive. It made everyone retreat again and again. She actually created a path. She walked neither fast nor slow. The clothes on her body moved without wind. That was the demeanor of an expert. Her killing intent was overwhelming, making them want to kneel down and surrender. Just like that, she walked out of the encirclement. Gong Yimo suddenly turned around. It was so far away that he should not be able to see clearly. However, Lu Jin felt that her eyes fell on him. It made his back stiffen and his breathing stop. You should be glad. Her clear voice was sent to his ears by her inner strength. It was like the music of death, making him shudder. If it wasn't for the fact that I didn't want to kill all of Bai Ji's subordinates, tonight would be the day you die. Lu Jin's legs went soft, and he fell to the ground. He did not doubt that if it wasn't for Bai Ji, Gong Yimo would have killed him from start. Now, he did not have Bai Ji as his trump card. Gong Yimo also escaped. What awaited him was only death. Chapter 444. After saying this sentence, Gong Yimo turned and left. But with every step she took, the aura of her body increased layer by layer, making it impossible for anyone to resist. In the end, the army watched her leave. The ground was full of corpses, and the smell of blood was overwhelming. However, no one dared to ask her for an explanation, until her figure was swallowed by the night. The murderous aura gradually disappeared. Many people were sweating profusely, as if they had just escaped from death. Was there really such a powerful person? Many people were trembling in fear, but they were still silent and did not dare to speak. Was it really that easy? Gong Yimo's mouth was bleeding nonstop. The more she wiped, the more blood. There was the aura just now was at least at the 7th level. However, in order to frighten everyone, she used her inner force to create an illusion of deterrence when she was injured and exhausted, which worsened her internal injury. Now that she had left the crowd, her entire body was dispirited, and exhaustion could be seen between her brows. However, she cannot stop, because that Lu Jin was very smart. Once he regained his senses, he would definitely pursue her without restraint. She had to go further away and hide. On the other side, Bai Chio was already burning with anxiety. He was quite familiar with this area and found a bush to hide. However, after so long, Gong Yimo still did not come out. The monkey was sleeping by his feet. Obviously, it had fallen asleep. Bai Chio could not leave, so he could only ask the monkey for help. You should go and find her. Bai Chio was quite gentle to the little monkey. However, when the little monkey saw someone disturbing its sleep, it clawed at Bai Chio. There were 3 bloody marks on Bai Chio's hand. It was painful and numb. Bai Chio was angry. If you don't find her, she will die. Can you bear to see her die? Only then did the little monkey move. She couldn't die. Therefore, it angrily got up and went out to find her. It felt that it was so difficult to raise a person. It had to worry about everything. It followed the blood trail and found Gong Yimo. At this time, Gong Yimo was holding onto a tree and seemed to have fainted. However, the monkey did not know. It was shocked and quickly called Bai Chio to help. This trip was really tiring for the monkey. On the other side, when everyone walked out from the shadow of death, Lu Jin was the first to realize that something was wrong. If Gong Yimo was really that powerful, it wouldn't have taken so much effort to retreat with Bai Chio and the others in the beginning. Moreover, if Gong Yimo was really that powerful, how could she be injured? Thinking about it carefully, there were many suspicious points. Suddenly, a possibility flashed in Lu Jin's mind. Could it be that Gong Yimo wasn't that powerful at all? Could it be that he had taken some secret medicine to temporarily increase his power? The more he thought about it, the more likely it seemed. Otherwise, she wouldn't have let go of such a good opportunity to kill him. He had been tricked. Lu Jin could no longer sit still and sent troops to search for Gong Yimo's whereabouts. When things reach an extreme, Gong Yimo must be very weak right now. Since he and Gong Yimo had already gotten to this point, he could only kill her. The soldiers were still a little unwilling, but after listening to Lu Genie's analysis, they felt that it was reasonable. One after another, they left. In their hearts, they were a little angry at Gong Yimo for scaring them. She had to be caught. When Bai Chio saw Gong Yimo's lifeless appearance, he was scared out of his wits. He went over to check her breathing. When he found that she was only unconscious, he heaved a sigh of relief. Then, he brought Gong Yimo to his father's place. Now that there were 2 injured people, what should he do? Bai Chio frowned. On the other side, the little monkey was very straightforward and directly gave Gong Yimo a claw. Gong Yimo slapped the little monkey with her back hand and pressed it to the ground, unable to move. Although there was a claw mark on its face, it was awake. She faintly glanced at the little monkey. Little monkey, it must have wanted to scratch her claw for a long time, right? However, she didn't have time to bicker with a monkey. Right now, she had to think of a way to escape. Bai Chio said, "You said that some people loyal to father were sent to patrol the border. If we can find them, we will be safe." Gong Yimo thought about it and felt that it made sense. Hence, she stood up shakily and said to Bai Chio, "You can take your father with you. I can walk on my own." Bai Chio retracted his hand and nodded. Then he led the way. Although the little monkey was hit by Gong Yimo, it still jumped onto her shoulder and walked together. Under the cover of the forest, they continued to head north. However, very soon, the pursuers arrived. Gong Yimo heard the sound. There were quite a lot of people coming. It was obvious that they were determined to catch them, and Bai Chio was carrying 2 injured people, so they couldn't go far. Gong Yimo made a prompt decision and stuffed the gold medal into Bai Chio's hands. "Take the gold medal and go find those people to help. Your father and I will stay behind. Don't worry, I have a way to stall for time." Bai Chio was of course unwilling. "No, I will stay behind. You go." Gong Yimo glared at him. "Can you not let your emotions affect your decisions? Those people must know you, right? They don't know me. I will only waste time if I go." Bai Chio felt that leaving these 2 injured people here was clearly a dead end. They had already confronted Lu Jin. Now, in order to survive, Lu Jin would definitely kill Gong Yimo if he met her. He couldn't do that. "This is an order," Gong Yimo suddenly said seriously. Under the moonlight, her small face was pale. Her arrogance was still there. Her decision couldn't be changed. Bai Chio suddenly felt a lump in his throat. Gong Yimo and his Bai family were not related. But now, the one who betrayed them was his father's adopted son. The one who saved them was an outsider and a woman. Bai Chio suddenly knelt down. "Princess's kindness, Bai family will never forget it. This time, please let me stay. Princess is precious and shouldn't be involved in this." The night wind blew her clothes. She stood there covered in blood, but her expression was indifferent. Her beauty was like a fairy who was about to ascend to immortality. She sighed and shook her head. "You go. I can guarantee that I will survive. Can you?" He couldn't. Gong Yimo helped Bai Chio up. She looked into his eyes and said softly, "Who said that women are not as good as men? You watch carefully." As she said that, she used her inner force and pushed him far away. Bai Chio looked at her blood-stained sleeves. She turned around resolutely and led his father into the depths of the forest. At that moment, her back was tall and clear. It was the only memory of a woman in his mind. Bai Chio finally left. Gong Yimo tried her best to hide Bai Ji in the bushes. She let Little Monkey keep watch while she buried some hidden weapons. Finally, she sat under a big tree. Her skirt spread out. She took some medicine. Then, she tore the cloth that was tied around her waist and began to apply the medicine on herself. When the pursuers caught up, what they saw was such a beautiful scene. A woman knelt down, her black hair draped over her shoulders. Her clothes were bright red, and her small face was fair and clear under the moonlight. Her expression was peaceful, but the wounds on her body were bleeding. The combination of these tragic and calm colors was the thickest and most colorful brush stroke between heaven and earth. Chapter 446. Gong Yimo clenched her teeth as she watched him take off his clothes. The taste of blood in her mouth had yet to dissipate, but now it was filled with a sweet taste. There were still a few hundred people who did not dare to come over. But here, under the tree, Lu Jin was actually shameless enough to take off his clothes in front of a few hundred people. Gong Yimo closed her eyes and tried to adjust her breathing. She would catch him off guard later, but she was too tired. Her head was dizzy. When she closed her eyes, she had a feeling that she did not want to open them. She frowned and sat under the tree. She leaned against the tree trunk like a lifeless porcelain doll. But she was so beautiful that it was shocking. She was so fragile and tough that people could not take their eyes off her. Even Lu Jin was stunned. He who was about to take off his pants could not help but lower his head and reach out to pinch her chin. At this moment, a cold light flashed in Gong Yimo's eyes. A dagger appeared out of thin air. She was going to cut off his hand. Ah! Lu Jin screamed and retreated. Gong Yimo opened her eyes. She was a little surprised. Her attack missed because someone was one step ahead of her. An arrow was shot and pierced through Lu Jin's palm. Gong Yimo turned around and saw Bai Chio standing there with a bow, an arrow. His face was serious, and his chest was still moving up and down violently. But he caught up, and when he saw Lu Jin taking off his clothes and wanting to take advantage of Gong Yimo, he shot an arrow without thinking. He wanted to teach him a lesson. Lu Jin fell to the ground and pulled out the arrow from his palm. He stared at Bai Chio and wanted to eat his flesh. "It's you again? Good. I will take care of you together." Just when he was about to explode, many people rushed over. Lu Jin took a look and saw that it was Tian who was loyal to Bai Ji. That guy had seen Bai Chio before. He only had a few hundred people rushing over. Tian was patrolling the border and had a few thousand people under him. He could not fight them head-on. That Bai Chio had the ability to get Tian here. He gritted his teeth and glanced at Gong Yimo. She was holding a dagger in her hand. She was not someone to be trifled with. He glanced at Bai Chio again. Bai Chio pulled out an arrow again and aimed at him. Lu Jin was extremely unwilling, but he still turned around and fled. Bai Chio was flustered and did not chase after them. Gong Yimo was relieved. She waved her hand, and the dagger she used to sneak attack fell to the ground, destroying the last trap. The sound of the explosion made Bai Chio rush in front of her. "Are you all right?" He didn't dare to reach out to touch her. At this moment, she was as fragile as a person made of snow. His voice was so soft that it would startle her. When Gong Yimo saw that it was Bai Chio, she felt relieved and fainted. Bai Chio quickly held her in his arms. At the last moment, he heard her softly call out 2 words. "Gong Dai, Your Highness, what's wrong?" They were all extremely excited about the counterattack. At this time, they also guessed that the weapon in their prince's hands must be the divine weapon in the princess's hands that everyone coveted. All of them were extremely excited. "I'm fine." Gong Dai shook his head. Just now, he seemed to have heard the royal sister calling him. But how could that be? She was in Yuchi right now, he smiled. Could it be that thinking of someone would cause hallucinations? At this moment, the rain had stopped. They had to hurry and meet up with the main group. Xiaoqi was a talkative person. He still hasn't woken up from the power of the attack just now. His face was full of excitement. But because Gong Dai ordered him not to say anything, he could only ask something else. "Your Highness, are we really going to build a road next?" It was very boring and not fun at all. Gong Dai glanced at him. "You go to Shizhou and do something." When Xiaoqi heard that there was a new task, he quickly asked, "What is it?" Gong Dai gave his command token to him. "Pass down this prince's order. Choose 3,000 elites from this prince's 30,000 troops and secretly come to Long City. This prince has a use for them." Could it be that he wants to build a private army? Build a private army that can have a body? Xiaoqi's eyes lit up. He nodded repeatedly, but he still asked, "I thought your highness would go to Yuchi to look for Princess Yuchi after leaving the capital." Gong Dai glanced at him coldly. He immediately stopped talking. After a while, when Xiaoqi thought that the prince was angry, Gong Dai said faintly, "I also want to go." His voice was almost inaudible, but he couldn't go. Yuchi hadn't started the war yet because both sides were evenly matched. But if he went, not only would it aggravate the conflict, he might also be misunderstood by the people of Yuchi as Dayu State wanting to start a war. Royal Sister wouldn't want to see that scene, so he couldn't go now. But now is now. and the future was the future. As long as Yuchi started the war, he would help whoever royal sister wanted to help. No one would be able to blame Daiyu State. But they hadn't started the war for a long time. Should he do something secretly? He really wanted to see royal sister as soon as possible. She was so outstanding that he couldn't feel at ease wherever she went. Only by looking at her could he feel a little more at ease. The more he thought about it, the more uneasy he felt. Gong Dai frowned slightly and began to think of ways to aggravate the conflict between them. He remained silent. Bai Chio was scared out of his wits. He held Gong Yimo with both hands and carefully used his face to feel Gong Yimo's breathing. He was relieved when he found that she was only unconscious. If she died because of this, he was afraid that he wouldn't feel good for the rest of his life. At this time, Wen Yintian also came. He was an uncle in his 50s. He had a face full of beard and looked very strong. "Young master, this is the princess of Gu State." Wen Yintian stared with his bell-sized eyes and said in disbelief, "She looks like a delicate little girl. Is she really as powerful as he said? Also, what was that sound just now? Where's the general?" Bai Chio didn't know how to answer. At this time, a monkey pulled his clothes. Bai Chio lowered his head and saw that the monkey was pointing in a direction. Bai Chio was happy and quickly said, "Uncle Wen, my father is there. Quickly go and save him." When Wen Yintian heard this, he quickly followed the monkey. Another elegant man in his 40s with a white face and no beard came and said to Bai Chio, "Come, give her to Uncle Chong. You are also injured. Have a good rest." In fact, he knew that Bai Chio hated women since he was young, not to mention hugging them. So he was afraid that Bai Chio would feel uncomfortable and quickly came over to take her. Who knew that Bai Chio would avoid it, and his handsome face was slightly red. "It's okay. I will carry her." How could he be willing to let other men carry Gong Yimo? But there was no woman here. Chong Zaid was stunned. He saw that Bai Chio had already carried Gong Yimo without any reluctance. He touched his chin and suddenly sighed. It seemed that the young master was also enlightened. But with General Bai's identity, it would be difficult to carry the princess. Also, the young master usually didn't care about those women. It turned out that he hadn't met the right person. Look at him being so careful. It was the first time in his life. Chapter 447. They couldn't go back to the Longcheng camp because the tiger tally was in Lu Jin's hands. If they went back, Lu Jin would turn the tables on them. The few thousand of them were nothing. So they found a place to camp and discussed what to do next. Gong Yimo was the only woman here. She lived alone in a tent. Bai Ji also asked the military doctor to check on her. He said that she was in a coma because of poison. It seemed that she hadn't eaten for a long time. She was very weak. There were no fatal injuries. She might wake up in a few days. Bai Chio twisted the handkerchief with water and gently wiped Gong Yimo's face. His movements were so careful, as if he was afraid of hurting her. He couldn't imagine that a woman like her, in front of tens of thousands of people, would be able to tell them to leave without batting an eyelid. He didn't know how she managed to escape, but when he saw her fainted under the tree, he knew that it wouldn't have been easy. Later on, when there were pursuers, she still told him to leave first to get help. For the first time in his life, he felt that he was so useless. He called himself a man in vain. His father had told him when he was young that a man should have an indomitable spirit and should not run away in the face of battle. But tonight, he had violated both of those commandments. He was ashamed. He remembered clearly in his mind that when she used her inner strength to push him away, her red sleeves fluttering in the wind. The sleeves were stained with blood. It should represent evil. But in his eyes, it was more holy than the white veil. It was more seductive. Bai Chio's hand tightened. He couldn't remove the handkerchief on Gong Yimo's face. He didn't dare to look at that face again. When he looked at that face, he couldn't move his eyes away. He wanted to sink into it, so he could only look at her waist that was wrapped hastily. Because of her last counterattack, her waist was once again badly mutilated. Bai Chio suddenly felt heartache. How could he feel heartache for a woman? He didn't dare to think about it anymore. He quickly shook his head. He used a pair of scissors to cut the cloth on her waist and then carefully untied it. Sure enough, blood was still flowing. It was bright red and it was a sharp contrast with her snow-white skin. Baichio's eyebrows jumped. He suddenly felt that it was a mistake to bandage her, because it tested his willpower too much. But now, he was even more unwilling to let others bandage Gong Yimo. So he chanted the clear heart mantra in his heart while bandaging her. When he was done, his serious face was covered with sweat. It was as if he had just fought a tough battle. He was ready to leave after bandaging her, but Gong Yimo suddenly mumbled and then grabbed his hand. Baichio's heart was not pure to begin with. With her taking the initiative, he only felt that the hand she was holding was burning. But when he wanted to pull his hand away, he couldn't. Only he knew how much strength a person in a coma had. This kitten-like voice caused Baichio's serious expression to crack. His face turned red again. Even he didn't know what he was embarrassed about. He must leave. If he stayed any longer, he would feel weird. But this time, Gong Yimo really used some strength. She pulled him. "Don't go. I'm in pain," she felt wronged. Even in her sleep, she pursed her lips as if she was going to cry. Baichio's heart softened. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but he still sat back. "You only feel pain now? What were you doing earlier? Weren't you very fierce and domineering? You even said that you wanted to show me what it means to be a woman who is not inferior to a man." Baichio suddenly pursed his lips and smiled. How could those women who were not inferior to a man be compared to her? Thinking of this, he was suddenly shocked. He didn't understand why his feelings had changed. Why did he suddenly feel that he didn't hate women? The next day, Gong Yimo woke up. She saw Baichio beside her bed. She was shocked. "You're awake?" His voice was a little hoarse. His eyes were red. The bandage on the wound on his face was removed. The wound was beginning to scab. Gong Yimo looked at him puzzledly. "You watched over me for the whole night?" She was really flattered. Didn't this guy see women as poisonous? But when she thought of how she was injured because of their family, she felt at ease. Baichio didn't answer her question. Seeing that Gong Yimo still couldn't move, he went out to get water for her to wash up. When she was washing up, Baichio went to bring breakfast. He was so considerate. Gong Yimo was stunned. Did this guy really become a slave? Gong Yimo was puzzled. She drank some porridge and lay down again. After a while, two people came in. Wen Yuqian and Chang Zaid were a little embarrassed. After all, Gong Yimo was a beautiful girl. She was still recovering. It was not appropriate for them to come in, but the situation was critical now. They couldn't care less. They bowed and introduced themselves. Then, the two of them went straight to the point. Now that Longshang camp is controlled by Lu Jin, we have discussed a few countermeasures. Please help us. Gong Yimo nodded. She knew that the two of them were just trying to find a doctor in a desperate situation. After all, they didn't have many people now. Bai Ji was still unconscious. They felt helpless, and she had the highest status here. Naturally, they had to give her some face. But Gong Yimo didn't agree with their plan, because the chance of winning was too small. Bai Ji was unconscious. They couldn't even find out the whereabouts of the other half of the tiger tally, let alone fight back. "Then what is your opinion, princess?" Chang Zaid humbly asked for advice. His attitude was very sincere. Gong Yimo thought for a while. "Let's wait for 2 days. If Lu Jin comes in these 2 days, we will hide. First, I need to rest and recover. Second, we will see if General Bai can wake up," Gong Yimo said and coughed a few times. Her body was indeed very weak. "If General Bai can't wake up, I will borrow soldiers when I get better." Borrow soldiers? When Tian glared. He looked very fierce. His voice was also very loud. When he spoke, it was like a large bell. "At this border, other than our launching camp, who else has soldiers? Even if there were, those people were just ants trying to shake a tree." Gong Yimo laughed softly. Her face was pale, but when she spoke, she had a calm and confident demeanor. "You also said that this is the border. Longqing Camp is the garrison of Daiyu State. Further north, isn't there Yu Qi's garrison?" You. When Tian didn't know what to say, Baichio and Chang Zaid were also shocked. They felt that her words were no less than a fairy tale. Borrow soldiers from Yu Qi? Gong Yimo seemed to have a well-thought-out plan. She comforted them. "Where there is a will, there is a way. Since I dare to say this to Yu Qi, They naturally have some confidence in me. Other than that, do you have any better ideas? Chapter 448. An even better idea. Chang Zaid and the rest looked at each other. They really didn't have a better idea. But was it possible to borrow soldiers from Yuqi? Now that the civil war in Yuqi was about to break out, neither the Empress Dowager nor the young emperor dared to act rashly. What if the other party misunderstood and started fighting? Well, this wasn't a problem that the people of Daiyu State needed to think about. Chang Zaid finally sighed. He should go and take care of the general. Maybe he would wake up after feeding him more ginseng soup. 3 days later, Gong Yimo's injuries were slightly better, but Lu Jin and the rest didn't give up. They tried to find Gong Yimo a few times, but they were evaded by the wetlands and forests. Lu Jin was getting more and more anxious. Although Bai Ji looked better, he didn't show any signs of waking up. Gong Yimo made a prompt decision to bring Bai Ji to Yuqi. First, to seek medical treatment. Second, to borrow soldiers. No matter what, it was the only way. In the end, they sat in a makeshift carriage. Gong Yimo and Bai Ji, the two patients, sat in the carriage while Bai Chio and Chang Zaid took turns to drive the carriage. They really went to Yuqi. With Yuqi's invitation, Gong Yimo entered Yuqi easily. Even Chang Zaid was surprised. He didn't expect that he would be able to enter Yuqi so openly in his lifetime. Yuqi was now under martial law. Entry and exit were strictly prohibited. Now, only the shops that the Prince of Qi had set up in Yuqi could still operate. The other people had been chased away long ago. After passing through the checkpoint, Gong Yimo continued to walk and finally stopped at the border town, Moon City. Chang Zaid couldn't figure out Gong Yimo's thoughts and said, "Princess, the border forces are now divided into two groups. One is controlled by Empress Dowager Yuqi, and the other is controlled by the little emperor. You're acting so rashly. What do you want to borrow troops?" Gong Yimo shook her head. "It's not appropriate to borrow soldiers from either side. If I borrow from the emperor, he will be worried that the Empress Dowager's men will take advantage of the situation. If I borrow from the Empress Dowager, she will think the same." Bai Chio was expressionless. "Then why did you say that you wanted to borrow soldiers?" Gong Yimo seemed to see that the two men were very depressed. She stroked Little Monkey and smiled. "Don't you know how to be flexible? We can borrow from both sides." Chang Zaid couldn't help but ask, "But you're a guest invited by Emperor Yuqi." The clearance document just now was Emperor Yuqi's jade seal, and they had cleared it at the Emperor's border camp. How could the Empress Dowager lend troops to someone who was helping her opponent? Gong Yimo giggled. "Where there's a will, there's a way. I've said it from the beginning. How would we know if we don't try?" Although she said that, she already had a plan in mind. They found a place to stay in Moon City. Then, Gong Yimo sent a letter to the Emperor of Yuqi, asking him to meet her. Yes, she wanted him to come and see her. Since he had a favor to ask of her, how could he not appear? These few days, Bai Chio and the rest were very anxious. Perhaps Gong Yimo was very anxious, but she still looked calm and composed, as if she had a card up her sleeve. On the third day, Gong Yimo finally met the person who wanted to meet her. Unexpectedly, the person who came first was not Si Wuyan, but Empress Dowager Yuqi. Gong Yimo was invited to a private room. When the curtain was lifted, she was surprised to see a graceful and luxurious woman. She was much younger than when they met in her previous life. She was dressed very delicately from head to toe. Now, she was only in her 30s. She took good care of herself and had power and influence. That kind of nobility was far from what an ordinary lady could have. It was a kind of natural dignity. Seeing this legendary woman, Gong Yimo was surprised but quickly calmed down. In her previous life, she and Empress Dowager Yuqi had fought several times and could be considered to have a mutual understanding of each other. Gong Yimo admired a woman who was able to hold power step by step during the feudal era. It was just that this Empress Dowager had some wisdom and courage. She just lacked a little benevolence and the ability to rule a country. Otherwise, the civil strife in her previous life would not have lasted for 10 years until she fought her way in. And now that she was here, it proved that in Yuqi, her power was still stronger than the emperor. Gong Yimo gave a junior's greeting. Empress Dowager Yu Qi, Dong Wani, was also sizing up Gong Yimo. The clothes she wore were East Continent's snow brocade. Every inch of the brocade was gold. The brocade was gorgeous, and under the sun, it shone like pearls. It was beautiful beyond words. On the other hand, the young lady was dressed very elegantly. But the blue sky after rain was very pleasing to the eye. She took a closer look and found that it was made from the cloud sky brocade that Yu Heng could only get once a year. It was low-key and luxurious. She wore a full set of jewelry on her head. It was made from Nanhai Jin's 100-year-old Eastern pearls. The brilliance was restrained, and each pearl was worth 1,000 gold. But the young lady opposite her only wore a hairpin. But that hairpin was a gorgeous blue color. It was extraordinary. With one look, she could tell that it was Jinxiu Master's Dian jadeite craftsmanship that was not passed on to outsiders. It was priceless. With one look, she knew what to do. She had a basic understanding of this young lady who seemed to be low-key and simple, but was actually filled with glory and splendor. Not to mention that calm temperament. It was a style that she had never seen before. She thought that there was no woman in the world who could stand shoulder to shoulder with her. But after seeing this young lady who was rumored to have amazing skills, she could not find a trace of inferiority. So she sighed and said, "Princess is too courteous." Princess came from afar. Jia came to see you and wanted to do the honors of a host. Gong Yimo did not mention at all why she sent a letter to see Wu Yin, but the one who came was her. After saluting, she sat beside the Empress Dowager and sat at the same level as her. Her dignified manner was not inferior to that of the Empress Dowager. Dong Wani could not help but raise her spirits and said softly, "I wonder what princess came to Yuchi for?" Gong Yimo smiled, revealing her white teeth. "One does not visit a temple without a cause. I came to ask Yuchi for a favor." Dong Wani expressed her disbelief. Wasn't it Si Wuyin, that brat, who specially invited her to help? How did it become that she had a favor to ask of Yuchi? Gong Yimo saw that Dong Wani was confused, so she frankly told her what happened at the Longxing barracks. Then she sighed. It's embarrassing to say that this is a family matter, but as the saying goes, distant water cannot put out a nearby fire. So, I want to borrow truth from Yuchi. Dong Wani thought it was funny. Her hibiscus face showed a timely expression of surprise. "Princess, aren't you afraid that it's easy to borrow troops, but in the end, you're inviting a wolf into the house?" Dong Wani did not know if this lass was really stupid or pretending to be stupid. She was honest about the chaotic situation at the borders of Daiyu State. If she borrowed troops from Yuchi, wouldn't it be easy for Yuchi to directly invade Daiyu State? Unexpectedly, Gong Yimo shook her head. How could it be inviting a wolf into the house? It's just like if I asked you to borrow troops. You should not refuse. Oh, Dong Wani suppressed her sarcasm and blinked. Aijia wants to hear Princess's opinion. Chapter 449. Gong Yimo pretended not to hear the mockery and continued. "Empress Dowager, think about it. If you don't help us at this critical juncture, what will happen to our Daiyu State's enemies when you fight with the little emperor in the future?" Dong Wani only smiled and didn't reply. If they wanted to go against her, they had to have the ability to do so. As if understanding her thoughts, Gong Yimo pretended to be surprised and said, "You're so calm. Are you prepared?" She raised her eyebrows and said with a wicked smile, "Let me guess. Recently, I brought Bai Ji to visit all the famous doctors in Moon City, but they were all helpless. I've never heard of such a brilliant poison. I've never heard of Daiyu State, but I know a thing or two about Yuchi. For example, if we're talking about using poison, who in this world can compare to you? Empress Dowager?" Only then did Dong Wani say contemptuously, "There's no proof. What does Bai Ji's matter have to do with me? Princess, don't slander me." Gong Yimo lowered her head and chuckled. "I'm just guessing. I'm guessing that someone in Yuchi helped Lu Jin with the condition that when Yuchi has internal strife in the future, Lu Jin has to send troops to repay the favor. Isn't that normal?" Seeing Dong Wani's slightly cold expression, Gong Yimo continued, "I'm ashamed to say this, I originally wanted to ask the Emperor of Yuqi for help. After all, he's a disciple of you, so a mere poison shouldn't be a problem. It's just that I met you first, Empress Dowager, so I thought of asking you for help directly. I didn't mean to suspect anything, so don't misunderstand. Dong Wani secretly gritted her teeth. She felt that Gong Yimo was really smart. She could suspect her just by looking at the source of the poison. How troublesome. If she didn't act according to her wishes and detoxify the poison, she would definitely look for Si Wuyan. And with Si Wuyan's talent and intelligence, it wouldn't be difficult for him to detoxify the poison. After thinking it through, she said softly, "Although I don't know the cause of Baiji's poison, it will be easy for me to detoxify it. I just don't know how Princess will repay me." Gong Yimo said obediently, "The only way to repay me is that when Daiyu State has internal strife, Dragon City Camp will not interfere." Dong Wani's expression and hesitation. Originally, if Gong Yimo didn't come, she could get Lu Jin's help during Yuqi's internal strife. But now that she was here, not only saved by Ji, she even lose Dragon City Camp's help. How could she be willing now? Gong Yimo faintly said, "The Empress Dowager is wise. She should understand that when Yuqi is in internal strife, the best solution is to not intervene." Seeing that Dong Wani was still hesitant and unhappy, Gong Yimo smiled and said, "It's fine if you agree, but if you refuse, I'll go and ask Si Wuyan. I'm afraid that when the time comes, not only will the Dragon City Camp not be involved, but they might even help your enemy." Dong Wani's sharp eyes suddenly stared at Gong Yimo, but Gong Yimo didn't feel guilty at all. They looked at each other, and the air between them seemed to freeze. After a while, the Empress covered her face with a feather fan and said softly, "Princess from Daiyu State, has anyone ever told you that you are arrogant?" She was threatening her in such a blatant manner, and in her own territory. Did she really think she didn't dare to kill? Gong Yimo raised her eyebrows, as if she didn't feel the tense atmosphere. "Arrogant? I'm just a little bold. It's like I'm not only asking you for medicine, but also to borrow soldiers from you. If I'm arrogant, what should I do in the future?" Gong Yimo pretended to be distressed. Dong Wani waved her feather fan. She looked delicate and noble, but she was angry. Gong Yimo heard the sound of a sword being unsheathed from behind screen. She sneered. "As far as I know, you haven't recovered from your serious injuries. What if the Princess of Daiyu State dies here?" Dong Wani began to think about this possibility. Once Gong Yimo died, no one would meddle in her business, and the Dragon City Battalion would still be under her control. 50,000 people would be a great help. Originally, she wanted to cooperate with Baiji, but Baiji was stubborn. No matter how much she offered, he wouldn't betray the Emperor of Daiyu State. Therefore, if Baiji couldn't wake up, Gong Yimo couldn't live either. Gong Yimo thought that this was the beauty of a snake and scorpion. She was ready to kill her, but there was no murderous intent in her tone. It was as if she was just asking. She shook her head and sneered. "I don't think this is a good idea. If I die here, Yuqi will be in danger." She directly threatened Dong Wani. She was telling her that if she dared to hurt her, the entire Yuqi would be finished. Her fearlessness made Dong Wani hesitate. As the Empress Dowager of a country, she had many eyes and ears. Naturally, she knew that Gong Yimo was sent here because she didn't get along with the Emperor of Daiyu State. Therefore, she looked down on Gong Yimo, who didn't know that Yuqi was about to go to war. She was sent here at this time. Even if she had some ability, wouldn't it be more dangerous? However, when she heard Gong Yimo's tough words, she hesitated. Perhaps Gong Yimo's attitude was too calm, or perhaps she was too arrogant. She definitely had some ability. Gong Yimo threw out the last sentence. "Don't forget, I have something that Father is very interested in. If I die here, do you think Father will fly into a rage out of humiliation?" Her words completely made Dong Wani give up the idea of taking the risk. She gritted her teeth unwillingly. Seeing the cooked duck fly away just like that, she felt very depressed. Dong Wani lay back, and someone immediately rubbed her forehead. She closed her eyes, as if she didn't want to look at Gong Yimo again. "You child, Really, it's hard to like you. Dong Wani sighed faintly. Feeling the atmosphere in the room suddenly relax, Gong Yimo rubbed her nose and smiled apologetically without speaking. Forget it. Seeming to have made up her mind, Dong Wani said charmingly, I can save people, but I can't borrow soldiers. You also know that Ijia's Fengyi camp and the Emperor's Way He camp have always been competitors. What if I lend Fengyi's people to you, but Wei He's people take advantage of the situation and invade the camp? Moreover, after Bai Ji wakes up, what if he secretly helps Si Wuyin in order to take revenge on Ijia? Are you going to help Ijia resolve these matters? Of course. Dong Wani frankly admitted to poisoning, so Gong Yimo didn't hesitate. You don't have to worry about Bai Ji. After he wakes up, he won't look for you because he listens to me. Dong Wani didn't believe it. He only listens to the Emperor of Daiyu State. This was also the reason why she gave up on Bai Ji in the beginning. It was because he was stubborn that she changed her target to Lu Jin. Gong Yimo reached out and turned the gold medal in her hand. Do you see it? As if Zhen is here in person. What I mean is father's intention. This time, Dong Wani suddenly sat up straight and stared at the gold medal. It really was the Emperor's personal gold medal. It was actually in Gong Yimo's hands. She rejoiced in her heart. Fortunately, she didn't make a move just now. This princess seemed to have the Emperor's heart. She couldn't be touched. Chapter 450. If that's the case, then swear that you will never use the Dragon City camp's troops. Dong Wani's voice became serious. Gong Yimo sighed. Originally, she had some thoughts about the Dragon City camp, but now she had no other choice. Saving people was more important. Gong Yimo, swear to the heavens that I will never use the Dragon City camp's troops. If I go against it, I will be destroyed by the heavens and earth. After swearing, she shrugged indifferently. How about this? Dong Wani stared at her suspiciously, but she still relaxed a little. She talked about borrowing troops again. This time, she was not going to let go. She wanted to see how Gong Yimo would deal with the Dragon City camp. Seeing her unyielding attitude, Gong Yimo suddenly sighed and stood up. Since you insist, then I can only give up. Seeing Gong Yimo give up so quickly, Dong Wani, who had been vigilant, was at a loss. At first, Gong Yimo's attitude was so unyielding. She wanted to borrow troops and said that she had to do it. Why did she suddenly change? Dong Wani could not figure it out. Gong Yimo had already said goodbye. According to the agreement, Dong Wani gave her the antidote. Gong Yimo took it respectfully and really left. Dong Wani was a little depressed, but thinking that Si Wuyin would not lend her troops, she felt a lot better. When Gong Yimo left, a man came out from behind Dong Wani. He took over the maid's job and massaged Dong Wani's forehead. Seeing Dong Wani's confused expression, he knew that she did not understand. The very handsome man smiled and said, Actually, it's not difficult. This Daiyu State's princess is just creating a diversion. What do you mean? Dong Wani asked. The man smiled. Your Majesty, think about it. You love me so much that you can't bear to kill me. Then I want two things from you. One is power, and the other is wealth. Which will you give me? Dong Wani finally understood. She had been tricked. That girl kept saying that she wanted to borrow soldiers, and even told the people around her in front of everyone that she wanted to borrow soldiers for both sides. Naturally, her thoughts were led astray, and she thought that she really came to borrow soldiers. Unexpectedly, it was actually for Bai Ji's antidote. It made sense. If they really borrowed troops, the Daiyu State would suffer heavy losses once the war started. Even if they won in the end, it would be a Pyrrhic victory. Furthermore, he had used Yu Qi's soldiers to fight against the Daiyu State soldiers. Those who survived would definitely not be willing to be under Bai Ji's command. She really thought that Gong Yimo wanted to borrow troops for both sides. When she thought about it this way, she really felt that it was feasible. She was just waiting to see what additional conditions Gong Yimo would come up with. She did not expect that it was just a feint. I was actually tricked by a little girl. She's really scheming. She even tricked the people around her. Dong Wani sneered. So what if Bai Ji wakes up? It's still an internal strife. She might as well have really come to me to borrow soldiers. The man shook his head. Empress Dowager, you're wrong. Bai Ji is the spiritual leader of the Longqing camp. Once he appears, many people will change sides. Moreover, Bai Ji still has half of the tiger tally. Once he wakes up, Lu Jin will definitely die. Dong Wani gritted her teeth. She did not expect that after so much careful planning, not only did she not reap any benefits, she was even tricked by Gong Yimo. However, it was not so easy to take advantage of her. Just wait, Gong Yimo will cry. After thinking about the proper business, Dong Wani groaned softly and felt a headache. The man quickly stopped talking and directly acted. In an instant, the room was filled with a spring scenery. Everyone else retreated. After Gong Yimo came out with the bottle, she heaved a sigh of relief. The most important thing now was to wake Bai Ji up. She was only thinking about borrowing troops. There was an easier way to solve the problem. So who would want to look for trouble? But after she got the antidote, she did not use it immediately. Instead, she wanted to do an experiment. Unfortunately, Gong Yimo let some animals drink Bai Ji's blood, and there were no signs of poisoning. As a result, she really could not tell if the antidote was in her hands or not. Seeing this, Chong Zaid quickly said, "Why don't you let me test the poison? Animals can't, but humans can definitely." Gong Yimo shook her head. "Let's wait a little longer." She waited for another day. As expected, someone came to look for her again. Si Wuyen. It had been 4 years since she last saw him. Who knew what kind of temperament he had now? Gong Yimo was a little uncertain. Until the moment the door was pushed open, she suddenly understood. Si Wuyen was wearing the most dazzling red. That red seemed to be glowing with pearls. The sun shone through the window and onto his body. Gong Yimo narrowed her eyes. She only felt that the red was dazzling to the eyes. Now, the 24-year-old Si Wuyen was at the prime of a man's life. His fair and delicate chin was lowered. When his amorous peach blossom eyes glanced over, that moment of breathtaking would make people hold their breaths, afraid to disturb this beauty. Seeing that Gong Yimo was slightly stunned, his thin red lips that looked as if they were stained with blood curled up slightly. He said with ill intentions, "Do you like this face very much?" Gong Yimo came back to her senses. He touched his face with his fingers. "If you like it, Jim will give you a chance to see it every day." He smiled, revealing his white teeth. It was devilish and unrestrained, making Gong Yimo's body tremble. She did not dare to look anymore. This guy was a pervert. It was better not to provoke him. "I don't have time to banter with you. I came today because I have a request." "Oh." Si Wuyen's jade finger lightly tapped his lower lip. "Is it because of Bai Ji's matter? Didn't you already get the antidote from Imperial Mother?" Gong Yimo said gloomily, "It's better for me to keep an eye on your family members." As she spoke, she handed over half a bottle of antidote. This antidote was in liquid form and was stored in a jade bottle. Si Wuyen knew at a glance that there was only half a bottle. He did not expose her and only opened it to take a sniff. Then he said, "It's the antidote, but it's missing one ingredient. If you drink it directly, you'll definitely die." Gong Yimo's back straightened. She was worried that Dong Wani was up to no good. After all, once Bai Ji died, it would be very troublesome to deal with Lu Jin. This way, she would not have the energy to interfere with Yu Qi's matter. It was killing 2 birds with 1 stone. But at that time, she had concealed her thoughts very well. Perhaps Dong Wani was afraid that she would borrow soldiers and gave her the real antidote. On the other side, Si Wuyen had already taken out a red pill and threw it into the jade bottle. The pill disappeared the moment it entered the liquid. Si Wuyen handed the bottle to Gong Yimo, indicating that it was done. Gong Yimo was a little conflicted. She hated dealing with people who were unpredictable the most, because she did not know when they would plot against her. This was great. She had 2 bottles of antidote in her hands. But which one was the real one? Dong Wani and Si Wuyen. Neither of them could be trusted. What a headache. Chapter 451. When Si Wuyen saw that she was hesitating, she gloated. "Mother, this poison is called enrich. The poison is stored in the brain, so it will be difficult for you to find someone to test it on because the blood of the poisoned person is normal. Unless you can break open the poisoned person's brain? Gong Yimo glared at him, and he laughed even more happily. Do you want me to give you a dose of Enron as well, so you can test it? No need. Gong Yimo put the jade bottle in her pocket, but in reality, she put it in her space. As for who she should use the antidote for, she would think about it later. Si Wuyin was very satisfied with her actions. You appeared in Yuchi with my document. Can I understand that you are here to help me? Si Wuyin asked with a smile. His smile was very evil, and he definitely didn't look like a good person. Gong Yimo sighed. I am just a weak woman, and I have not recovered from my injuries. I'm afraid I can't help much. Then why did you come to Yuchi? Si Wuyin was a little dissatisfied. Seeing her refuse, his anger was written all over his face. Gong Yimo touched her nose. I am here to observe. Oh, to be honest, whether it is the Empress Dowager or His Majesty, I don't have much interaction with them. But I will help whoever is stronger to end the war faster. So before that, I want to observe. Gong Yimo said frankly. These were her true thoughts, and there was nothing false about them. After all, she wanted to end the civil strife as soon as possible. You are quite honest. Si Wuyin narrowed his eyes and smiled. He personally poured tea for Gong Yimo. His white, jade-like fingertips contrasted with the dark green jade bowl. There was an indescribable beauty. She appreciated beautiful things, but she couldn't give up her principles for beauty, so she didn't drink the tea. Seeing that she didn't move, Si Wuyin threatened. You are so disrespectful. Aren't you afraid that the two antidotes are fake? Gong Yimo shook her head. I still believe you. After all, the civil war in Longcheng camp is not good for you. That's hard to say. Si Wuyin smiled cruelly. After all, Yuchi is currently in an abyss of suffering. In order to prevent others from taking advantage of the situation, it's best to create chaos as well. Gong Yimo froze. Si Wuyin's threat was really reasonable. She gritted her teeth and drank the tea. Through the faint fragrance of the incense, Si Wuyin didn't say anything and focused on brewing the tea. He really gave off a noble and cold feeling. However, although she sympathized with his past, she couldn't help him because of that. Unexpectedly, Si Wuyin glanced at her and stared at her empty teacup as he spoke with dissatisfaction. A cow chewing on peonies. How precious was this tea? It was only 2 taels a year. Gong Yimo smiled awkwardly. I don't really like tea. Why don't we drink? Si Wuyin didn't even have the strength to glare at her. Sometimes she was so slippery that people couldn't do anything about it. If soft methods didn't work, then they could only use hard methods. Gong Yimo couldn't sit still. She had drunk the tea, seen the person, and made her position clear. She still had to rush back to save people. Si Wuyin saw that the cushion under her seemed to have grown thorns. He shook his head and smiled bitterly. Tell me, if Shen didn't want you to watch and wanted you to be on Zhen's side from the start, what should Shen do? Gong Yimo smiled. You think too highly of me. I'm just a little woman. I can't withstand the storm. Little woman? Si Wuyin slowly savored this word. A little woman can force Yuheng Emperor to death and let Kim, Yun, ascend the throne. A little woman can solve Liu Ye's winter food and population migration crisis in one fell swoop. Imperial Mother is too conceited. Although she is a woman and has sat in this position, she still looks down on women. Otherwise, she wouldn't have treated you like that a few days ago. Gong Yimo raised her eyebrows. She realized that Si Wuyin's ability couldn't be underestimated. He knew everything. Perhaps he really did have a better chance of winning. Si Wuyin confessed. In terms of military strength, Imperial Mother is still better. The reason Jin knows so much is because someone helped. Gong Yimo's heated heart calmed down again. At that time, she had pointed out a path for Si Wuyin and instigated him to oppose the Empress Dowager because she didn't want the 10 years of internal strife. But now, the situation was different. The problem hadn't been solved in 4 years. It made her question Si Wuyin's ability. If he couldn't help, she would rather help the Empress Dowager. Don't you want to know who told Jin? Seeing that Gong Yimo was thinking about the problem, Si Wuyin wasn't anxious at all. Not only that, Jin also accidentally found out a big secret about Dai Yu State's imperial family. Gong Yimo's thoughts were pulled back. What do you mean? Dai Yu State's secret? After thinking about it, it seemed that there was only one thing: her background. The Shui clan? Gong Yimo raised her eyebrows slightly. The Shui clan helped you? Seeing that Gong Yimo was surprised, Si Wuyin nodded. Yes, the Shui clan is very kind. When Jun needed help, they helped Jun without any compensation. Gong Yimo touched the fake stone on her body. For a moment, she didn't know what these people wanted to do. Si Wuyin said, "Say, if Gong Dai was poisoned by Jun, would you be obedient?" Hearing this, Gong Yimo's face sank, and a strong murderous aura exploded from her body. She no longer acted as if this matter had nothing to do with her. Instead, she really wanted to kill. Persuade you not to play with fire? Also, you're not Gong Dai's opponent. Thinking of this, Gong Yimo's murderous aura calmed down a little. Unexpectedly, Si Wuyin sneered again. Yes, Jin is not Gong Dai's opponent. But what if the Shui clan attacked? While telling Gong Dai the secret that would drive him crazy, they could take the opportunity to poison him. It doesn't seem that difficult. Bang! The entire red sandalwood tea table was overturned. Gong Yimo grabbed Si Wuyin's collar and pressed him against the wall. Her eyes were full of murderous aura. You want to use Gong Dai to control me? Gong Yimo narrowed her eyes. Then how about I kill you first? As soon as she moved, many people appeared in the room. Their auras were calm, and their blades were unsheathed. Let go of his majesty. Those people surrounded Gong Yimo and shouted sternly, "Otherwise, don't even think about leaving alive." Gong Yimo looked around, but did not let go. Si Wuyin was threatened at close range by Gong Yimo, but his expression remained calm. His nose was sharp, and he immediately smelled the scent of blood on Gong Yimo's body. Just now, he was afraid that her wound had split open again. Back down. He was caught by Gong Yimo, but he told his people to back down. But those people hesitated, afraid that Gong Yimo would accidentally hurt the emperor. Back down. It was best not to let him say it a third time. Those people had no choice but to back down with their blades. Finally, they all put away their blades. This kind of tacit understanding and fighting strength should be one of Si Wuyin's trump cards, right? Chapter 452. Gong Yimo's fingers tightened. She really wanted to kill him, because she suddenly felt that the person in front of her was very dangerous. He should never, ever have had any ideas about Gong Dai. Why are you in such a rush? If you kill me, Gong Dai will die without a doubt. Si Wuyin chuckled, as if he did not care about her threat. Gong Yimo sneered. Isn't there still Empress Dowager Yuqi? If I bring your head to see her, she will definitely be very happy to make me an antidote. Is it really an antidote? If you kill me, that old woman will succeed. Her ambition is no less than any man's. As long as she doesn't do anything and allows Gong Dai to die, the Dai Yu state will have one less threat. Will she help you? Si Wuyin was unperturbed. Gong Yimo narrowed her eyes. The hand holding his collar suddenly moved down, her palm facing his chest. Her 5 fingers dug in slightly, as if she wanted to dig out his heart. Her lips curled into a gentle, cold smile. You're hurting my heart too much. If I hadn't given you directions back then, you would still be in Dong Wani's bed right now. You're turning your back on me like this. It's really disappointing. Gong Yimo's words finally caused Si Wuyin's expression to change. That was the thing he hated the most when others mentioned it. But now Gong Yimo had said it out loud. But Gong Yimo was like this. If she was angered, she would poke the other party where it hurt. Her revenge was very direct. The two of them looked at each other and saw a strong, killing intent in each other's eyes. You'll only speed up Gong Dai's death. There's no use at all. Si Wuyin was angry. He wanted to use Gong Dai to threaten her and provoke her. Gong Yimo's fingers dug in even deeper. Si Wuyin gave a grunt, but he stubbornly refused to admit defeat. At worst, he would just die. Your Majesty. The people guarding on the side were all anxious, but the emperor did not speak, so they did not dare to act rashly. Why would the Snow Clan listen to you? This was what Gong Yimo couldn't figure out the most. It was also what she was most worried about. If the Snow Clan really told Gong Dai the secret of her identity, then Gong Dai would be caught off guard and the Snow Clan might really succeed. After all, the Snow Clan was her mother's family, so Gong Dai might not be so cautious. And that incident would really have a big impact on Gong Dai. Damn it, she had actually forgotten about the Snow Clan, whose intentions were unclear. Siwoo Yin took a few deep breaths before saying, "What kind of cooperation and transactions we have with others is none of your business, right?" Gong Yimo sneered. At this moment, her killing intent seemed to have materialized. "If you dare to hurt Gong Dai, I won't care. Furthermore, I guarantee that you will die faster than him." Siwoo Yin endured the pain and glanced at her. "Princess, if you want to save Gong Dai, it's not impossible," he sneered. "As long as you help me, the antidote will be sent to Gong Dai regularly. Isn't that great?" Gong Yimo shook her head. "I believe that Gong Dai won't fall for your tricks so easily, but you're hard to guard against. It's better to just kill you, not fall for it." Siwoo Yin laughed. "What if I tell him that you're poisoned? After all, in Gong Dai's eyes, you're so unguarded. In the past, he even dared to cut his own flesh and bleed so that you wouldn't be in danger, let alone taking poison. If you're so sure, then you wouldn't be afraid to kill me now. Seems like you're not afraid of death." Gong Yimo's tone was cold. "Kill him." It's not like she had never killed an emperor before. Feeling Gong Yimo's strength, she really wanted to make her move. Siwoo Yin took a deep breath. He could feel that his chest was bleeding. He never thought that Gong Yimo actually dared to. He didn't dare to delay any longer and said loudly, "Even if you kill me, you won't be able to stop the Snow Clan. They have already reached Long City and Gong Dai is there. You won't make it in time. If you kill me, I will also bury Gong Dai with you." "What do you want?" Gong Yimo was still afraid. She didn't want Gong Dai to be in any danger. But meeting such a despicable person, she was really angry. She really wanted to kill him. "What I want, it's very simple. I want you." Siwoo Yin finally didn't put on the airs of an emperor. Regardless of the fact that his chest was still bleeding, he laughed sinisterly. "That old witch is very satisfied with my martial arts. Do you want to give it a try?" Siwoo Yin. Gong Yimo was really angry. This guy was simply challenging the limit of her patience. Siwoo Yin smiled particularly coquettishly. "Or, if you eat the poison, I will ask the Snow Clan to stop." Gong Yimo hesitated. She felt that Gong Dai wouldn't be schemed against by the Snow Clan, but she was worried about this kind of thing. Who could say for sure? After all, regarding her life, Gong Dai really can't say for sure. She hesitated. The strength of her hand loosened a bit. Siwoo Yin panted a few times. Looking at her struggling face, he encouraged her. "I admit that Gong Dai is very difficult to deal with, but as long as it's related to you, he would rather kill the wrong person than let them go. A few days ago, I also sent the blood-red clothes you threw away to Long City. Do you think Gong Dai will recognize your clothes when he sees them? If the Snow Clan first tells him the secret of your life, then throw the blood-red clothes in front of him, and then poison the clothes, Gong Dai will be distracted. Can he escape? Don't be naive. Gong Dai is after all a human, not a god. Maybe it doesn't need to be so troublesome. The Snow Clan only needs to throw the blood-red clothes in front of him and tell him that if he wants you to live, he must take the poison. Do you think he will take it or not?" "Damn it." Gong Yimo suddenly loosened her hand. Looking at Siwoo Yin clutching his chest and coughing, she finally gritted her teeth and said, "If I take the poison you give me, will you let Gong Dai go?" Siwoo Yin saw that Gong Yimo had calmed down and nodded. "I can send a message in front of you." Gong Yimo stretched out her hand. "Where's the medicine?" Seeing that she is so obedient, Siwoo Yin suspiciously handed the medicine to her. He watched her play with the medicine in her palm for a moment, and then she threw it into her mouth. His heart instantly calmed down. He didn't know that Gong Yimo would throw the medicine directly into her space, so seeing that she obeyed, he breathed a sigh of relief. "It's your turn to send the letter," Gong Yimo said. "Guards!" Si Wuyin tidied himself up. Someone brought a carrier pigeon, so he was straightforward. He directly wrote a letter and then released the pigeon. They reached an agreement. Gong Yimo didn't want to fall out with her now. She wasn't sure if Gong Dai would be safe, so she endured. Since we are now in a cooperative relationship, the antidote you gave me before isn't a fake, right? Si Wuyin glared at her. Don't worry, I know what's important. How can Bai Ji compare to you? My princess. After getting the confirmation, she didn't stay any longer and directly went to find Bai Ji. Si Wuyin showed a pained expression and took the medicine. It was really difficult to tame this little wild cat, but his poison melted in his mouth, so he wasn't afraid of Gong Yimo at all. Gong Yimo, he wanted her. Chapter 453. After giving the antidote to Bai Chio, Gong Yimo quickly sent a letter to Gong Dai, telling him to be careful of the Snow Clan. Their position was unclear, so he had to be careful, but he didn't know if he could make it in time. After all, the Snow Clan was already in Long City. On Gong Ju's side, he received some news that there seemed to be unrest at the border. Calculating the time, Gong Ju realized that the riot in Longqing Barracks happened to coincide with Sister Gong's arrival. She wouldn't be involved, right? No. With Royal Sister's temperament, she couldn't be involved in it, could she? Thinking of this, Gong Ju's heart was burning with anxiety. He secretly sent Yu Qi's people to check carefully. He must get news of Sister Gong. As for himself, he made up his mind to go to Yu Qi as soon as he finished his work. Just when he was feeling annoyed, Lo Qi came to report that someone wanted to see him. Who is it? Gong Dai raised his eyebrows slightly. He walked into the room and saw two old people. And they are acquaintances? Gong Dai didn't say anything. He didn't know why the Snow Clan wanted to see him. Xue Qi, the old lady, claimed that she was Royal Sister's grandmother. That was why Gong Dai treated her so gently. I wonder why the two of you came from so far away. Shouldn't they be in Luyi? Xue Qi coughed a few times, while Xue Zhan took out something and presented it to Luo Qi. Luo Qi, who was next to Xue Qi, took a step forward and opened it. He discovered that it was a bloody robe. Gong Dai was very familiar with this dress. It was the dress that the royal sister designed herself. Gong Dai's expression didn't change, but his heart was in turmoil. He didn't touch the dress, but he was very sure that it belonged to the royal sister. Royal sister was really injured. Gong Ju's heart tightened. For a moment, he couldn't figure out why his people in Yu Qi hadn't received the news yet, but the Xue family had already received it. This was a conspiracy. As long as he thought about it, he knew that Sister Gong had fallen into their trap. How disobedient! Why didn't she protect herself? Gong Dai suppressed his worries. At the same time, he made up his mind to leave for Yu Qi immediately. Seeing the frown on Zhang Xian's face, the old man who was following the granny, Xue Zhan, said, "This is from our clansmen in Jade Qi. They said that the saintess was injured at the border. However, our abilities are limited. I hope that King Qi will lend us a hand." Saying this, Xue Zhan knelt down. His words were sincere, as if he was really worried about Gong Yimo. How did the royal sister become their saintess? Gong Dai calmed down a little and realized that this matter was very strange. The Snow Clan knew about the royal sister's whereabouts before he did. This was very suspicious. The only explanation was that the Snow Clan was involved in the matter of the royal sister's injury. That's why they were one step ahead of him. After figuring this out, Gong Dai suddenly became vigilant. However, he didn't show it on his face. "I will take care of this matter. Is there anything else?" Gong Dai said as he moved his finger. Lo Qi understood that the king wanted to arrest them. But aren't they the princess's family? Luo Qi thought strangely as he prepared in secret. The Snow Clan's people didn't know that they were exposed so quickly. Xue Qi coughed, and Xue Zhan spoke again. "I heard that. You like our saintess." When Xue Zhan said this, he seemed to be in a difficult position. Gong Dai narrowed his eyes and stared at him dangerously. Now that Gong Yimo wasn't by his side, he couldn't protect her. Therefore, he didn't want anyone to spread this matter. He didn't want anyone to hurt her. However, he couldn't stop them in time. Just as he was about to stop Xue Zhan from talking and capture them for interrogation, Shui Zhan said something that shocked him. Since it's like this, I should tell you the secret of our saintess. Gong Dai suppressed all his thoughts and looked at the two Snow Clan's people. Could it be that the royal sister had a secret that he didn't know about? Thinking about this, he suddenly felt nervous. It seemed that what Shui Zhan was about to say was very important to him. Maybe Shui Zhan was lying, but this matter was related to Gong Yimo. Gong Dai suppressed his anxiety and said in a low voice, "Oh, royal sister's secret? Isn't she the princess of our Daiyu state? Apart from that, what other secret does she have?" Shui Zhan looked around. "Please ask your attendants to leave." Gong Dai raised his brows slightly. He was on high alert against the Snow Clan. However, because he was strong, he wasn't afraid that the Snow Clan would do anything. Therefore, he asked Lo Qi and the others to leave. Shui Zhan looked at Shui Qi and said in a low voice, "King Qi, do you know the saintess's mother, Shui Yin?" Gong Dai frowned impatiently. At this moment, Shui Qi spoke. Her voice was low and hoarse. She looked old and weak. "Your Highness, Shui Yin, is the saintess of Snow Country." She opened her eyes and looked at Gong Dai. When Snow Country was destroyed, she was kidnapped by the monarch of Daiyu State. Gong Dai became more and more impatient. "I know all this." Shui Qi suddenly smiled strangely. "But there is one thing that you don't know." Cough, cough. Gong Dai, who was sitting on the seat of honor, looked at the stooped old woman in front of him and listened to her speak. "When Shui Yin was taken away, she was pregnant with my son's child. She was already 1 month old. 1 month old child." Gong Dai was stunned. It took him a while to understand what she was talking about. Shui Yin had a child who was 1 month old before she entered the palace? Gong Ju's eyes widened slightly. He could hear his heart thumping loudly in his chest. He didn't say anything for a long time. Calculating the time, it was Royal Sister's birthday and Shui Yin's arrival in the palace. If Shui Yin aborted the child and got pregnant again, Shui Yin shouldn't have been at this age. In other words, at that moment, Gong Ju suddenly felt a sense of timidity. His palms were wet, and he didn't dare to think about it. He was afraid that he couldn't control himself. Where's the proof? Gong Dai's gaze stunned Shui Qi, who had been through a lot. Words aren't proof. Where's the proof? Shui Qi tried to calm her heartbeat. Since the pressure coming from Gong Dai's body was too terrifying, she only found her voice after a long while. She trembled as she handed over a piece of jade to him. As long as it's a member of the Shui clan, her blood can seep into this piece of jade. Gong Dai took it subconsciously, but in the next second, he threw it on the ground. He threw the jade pendant on the ground, and his entire hand began to turn black. There was poison on it. "Guards!" Gong Dai shouted, and everyone surrounded the two of them. He quickly sealed his acupuncture points so that the poison wouldn't spread. Shui Qi widened her eyes in pity. This Gong Ju is too alert. In such a situation, he clearly lost his mind. But he threw away the jade just as he held it. If he had held it for a while longer, the poison would have reached his heart, and he would have been at their mercy. However, their plan couldn't keep up with the changes. Gong Dai discovered it in time, and the poison wasn't too deep. He would be able to detoxify it in a month. At this critical juncture, Shui Zhan suddenly spoke. "Your Highness, you shouldn't act rashly. Otherwise, the princess will be in grave danger." Chapter 454. Lo Qi, who was about to charge forward and capture them, hesitated. Who didn't know that the princess was the prince's Achilles heel? As expected, when Gong Dai heard Shui Zhan's words, he glared at him fiercely. "What did you do to royal sister?" His expression was so gloomy that even an old man like Shui Zhan couldn't help but feel a chill run down his spine. However, he was still an expert of the Snow Clan, so he was able to withstand the pressure. "We didn't do anything to the princess, but if the prince doesn't cooperate, the princess's poison will act up, and you can't blame us." "Poison act up?" Gong Dai narrowed his eyes. "You will use the same method to harm royal sister?" Shui Zhan sneered. "Of course there are people who can force the princess to take the poison herself. So, does the prince still want to resist?" Gondai caught the main point and laughed softly. His laughter made people's scalps numb. In the end, he raised his black, jade-like eyes and stared at them. His expression didn't change at all. Suppress them. Gondai. At this moment, the old woman, Shueqi, suddenly shouted. Don't tell me that you don't care about Gong Yimo's life or death. That's more like it. They obviously didn't have any relationship with her, but they kept calling her Saintess and Princess. Since the Snow Clan dared to do this, it meant that they didn't have any respect for the royal sister. It was normal for them to call her by her name. Gong Dai stood up. He was still holding his hand, and his lips were a little bruised. He looked at Shueqi without any pity for the elderly or the weak. I just want to ask you one thing. Is what you said just now true? He was referring to the fact that the royal sister wasn't of the Dai Yu state's bloodline. Shueqi smiled strangely. Does it matter whether it's true or not? Does it matter? Gong Dai sneered, but his heart was boiling with anger. It didn't matter because no matter what, he was determined to marry Gong Yimo. However, this matter was very important to him. It was so important that he didn't dare to be careless. Drag them away. Gong Dai leisurely made a cut on his hand and let the poisonous blood flow out. His entire person seemed to be enshrouded in fog, and his expression was unfathomable. You don't want to talk, but you don't know that I have ways to make you talk. He muttered to himself in a low voice as the corners of his lips curled up slightly. The flickering cold light in his eyes was frightening. Don't forget Gong Dai was born in Zhao prison. After the two of them were taken away, Lo Qi hurried forward and asked worriedly, Your Highness, are you all right? I'm fine. Gong Dai used his qi to force the poisonous blood out of his hand. Soon, his hand returned to its normal color, but he felt a little dizzy. Obviously, the poison was overbearing and could not be completely forced out. What happened? Gong Dai felt dizzy as he sat back down on the chair and said in a deep voice, Summon Lu Ronxin. Lu Ronxin, that was a godly doctor, and he had a strange temperament. His Highness had done him a favor, and he had promised His Highness to help him 3 times, but now His Highness wanted to use him. Lo Qi realized that the situation was serious and hurriedly went to summon him. Gong Dai closed his eyes and couldn't help but think of the royal sister. The royal sister had the space, and if she had willingly taken the poison, then she definitely wasn't poisoned. That's why he wasn't threatened by these people. But he was still worried about her, very worried about her. He really wanted to immediately appear by her side. He wanted to see her safely in his arms. Then his eyes couldn't help but be glued to the jade pendant on the ground. Was it possible? The royal sister was from the Shui clan, the child of the Shui imperial concubine, and the king of the Shui clan? He clearly shouldn't think about it, but he couldn't control himself. As soon as he thought of that possibility, as soon as he thought that the royal sister had nothing to do with him, he felt like his blood was flowing in reverse, and he couldn't control himself. He really wanted to go to the royal sister's side. He really wanted to. After Lu Ronxin arrived, he saw Gong Dai's complexion and helped him to the bed. At this time, Gong Dai was still conscious, but his body was getting weaker and weaker, as if his body had fallen asleep. Dr. Lu, how is our prince? Lo Qi's face was stiff and solemn. Lu Ronxin frowned and finally said, Fortunately, the prince was alert and didn't get poisoned too deeply. He also drained his blood in time to remove the poison. So this poison won't harm the prince's life, but what? Lo Qi asked anxiously. But there is still some residual poison in the prince's body. The medicine this old man prescribed can remove the poison, but it will take some time. During this time, the prince's martial arts will be temporarily disabled, and he will be weak all over. But after a month, the poison will be removed. More than a month. Lo Qi was a little confused. Now that the princess was in trouble, how could the prince wait until a month later to go to Yuqi? So he asked, what if the princess is forced to move? Lu Ronxin glared at him. Although it's residual poison, you can't be careless. This old man also needs to observe at all times and administer acupuncture every day. It's best not to overwork yourself in case the poison attacks the heart, which will be a little troublesome. As he spoke, he administered the acupuncture and prescribed the medicine. He told Gong Dai not to move too much and to rest well. Then he took the medicine box and left, saying that he would come back another day. Lo Chi saw that Gong Dai's eyes were closed and thought that he was resting. He didn't dare to disturb him, so he took the people outside. But was Gong Dai really resting? No, his whole heart was burning, boiling. He couldn't stop himself from thinking about what the Shui people had said just now. He was 80% sure that the Shui people weren't lying. They hated the Dai Yu state to the bone, but the royal sister was wholeheartedly loyal to the Dai Yu state. If the royal sister was really the princess of the Dai Yu state, the Shui people wouldn't have so much resentment toward her. It was very likely that the royal sister knew about her background, but refused to cooperate with them. She was still loyal to the Dai Yu state, so they flew into a rage out of humiliation, resulting in today's incident. The royal sister wasn't his royal sister, so there was no barrier between him and Momo. It was clearly the news he had dreamed of, but when it really happened, he was afraid. He was afraid that the news was fake. Gong Dai originally thought that he wouldn't be afraid anymore, but when it came to her, he was afraid of everything, afraid of everything. Your Highness. Suddenly, Lo Chi happily walked in. Your Highness, there's a letter from the princess. Gong Dai opened his eyes. Seeing that Gong Dai couldn't move, Lo Chi hurriedly said, Your Highness, don't worry, I'll read it for you. Gong Dai finally calmed down and listened. To Gong Dai, the Shui clan is cooperating with the emperor of the Yu Qi dynasty to use you to threaten me. Although Si Wuyin has already ordered the Shui clan to cancel the operation, I'm worried that the Shui clan will continue to act willfully for other reasons. So you must not believe them. Your royal sister, I am alive and kicking right now, very healthy. No one in the heavens or the earth is stronger than me. So when you receive the letter, tell me that you're safe. I'm worried about you. You're the #1 Tyrant sister in the world. Lo Chi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He never thought that in private, the princess would talk to the prince like this. What did she mean by #1 Tyrant sister in the world? The princess was really so cute. Chapter 455. After receiving the letter, Gong Dai was relieved. He knew that the royal sister would not be in trouble. He did not expect that he would be the one who fell into the trap. Gong Dai smiled bitterly. However, the royal sister said that no matter what the Snow Clan said, he must not believe it. Could it be that she already knew what the Snow Clan was going to say? Gong Dai's heart was burning again. If the royal sister guessed what they were going to say, wouldn't it prove that what they said was true? There was no blood relationship between them. Gong Emo fed the antidote to Bai Ji in trepidation. That guy, Si Wuyin, had 100 holes in his heart. Who knew that he would poison Bai Ji to death? Bai Chio was even more nervous than her. After all, it was his father. They had not seen each other for 2 years. He did not expect to meet with such a scene. However, the antidote was very effective. Bai Ji woke up quickly. Gong Emo finally breathed a sigh of relief. She asked Bai Chio to feed Bai Ji some food, and then she went to rest. Recently, she had been trembling with fear and always felt uneasy. Now that Bai Ji was awake, she was slightly relieved and could sleep well. Bai Ji was surprised to see Bai Chio. Wasn't he held hostage by Lu Jin? Sometimes, Lu Jin would feed him some antidote to wake him up and then force him to tell him the whereabouts of the other half of the Tiger Tally. When he woke up, he was not in the Dragon City barracks. Moreover, he saw his son. Did he come back to Zhao City? The father and son had not seen each other for a long time. Bai Chio first knelt down and apologized. Then, he told Bai Ji everything that happened during this period of time. Bai Ji was mute. He closed his eyes, and his eyebrows were filled with anger. This must be Empress Dowager Yu's plot. Because he rejected her invitation to cooperate, she turned around and attacked Lu Jin. However, now was not the time to find trouble with the Empress Dowager. He had to go back and reorganize the Dragon City barracks. The next day, Bai Ji rested well. With Bai Chio's help, they went to Gong Yimo's courtyard. This matter could not be delayed. Bai Ji decided to return immediately. Gong Yimo was not worried about him because the Dragon City camp had been peaceful for many years, and the people inside were all supported by Bai Ji. As long as he woke up, he would be more useful than anyone else. Not to mention that he also had the tiger tally in his hand, so she did not need to go back. She would let Bai Ji solve the problem of the Dragon City camp himself. Gong Yimo calmly accepted his bow and personally helped him up. General Bai, you don't have to be so courteous. I'm well aware of this matter. You don't have to say anything more. Go back and organize your affairs. Bai Ji nodded repeatedly. Suddenly, he pointed at Bai Chio. Gong Yimo touched her chin and guessed, "You want Bai Chio to stay?" Bai Ji nodded. No, he's your son. Maybe he can help you." Gong Yimo was sweating profusely. If she kept a man by her side for a long time, Gong Dai would definitely find trouble with her if he found out, but Bai Ji was very stubborn. He glared at Bai Chio, and Bai Chio immediately knelt down. Father doesn't have any other meaning. He thinks that now that the Dragon City camp is in chaos, if I go with you, I might be used by Lu Jin. After all, Lu Jin is a very sinister person. We have to be careful. So father wants me to stay with you for the time being. So it's like this. Gong Yimo let out a sigh of relief. She was afraid that Bai Ji would not be able to repay her for saving his life. So he asked his son to marry her. Seeing that Gong Yimo agreed, Bai Ji left with Chang's aid. He looked very anxious. Obviously, he was very worried about the situation of the Dragon City camp. Gong Yimo sighed. This person was still the same as before, but he was a trustworthy person. Bai Chio was a little embarrassed. He suddenly remembered that his father asked him to go to the room to talk last night. "Do you like the princess?" Bai Ji's pen was very sharp. He did not write nonsense on the paper. Bai Chio and his father's serious face instantly turned red. "Father, what nonsense are you talking about?" He hated women. He would not like anyone. "Then you go back to the Dragon City camp with me." Bai Ji wrote again. Bai Chio frowned. If he also left, wouldn't Gong Yimo have to stay in Yuchi alone? Even if she was very powerful, she was still a woman. There were a lot of things that women could not do. Seeing that Bai Chio did not say anything, Bai Ji frowned and wrote again. "You still say that you don't like the princess?" "Father." Bai Chio flew into a rage out of humiliation. "I don't like your son. I don't like women." Bai Ji sighed. He knew that because of his mother, his son had been very repulsed by women since he was young. He felt that women were fickle and full of lies. However, he also didn't want to see his son grow old alone. So he wrote, "Then you can stay." "How can I do that? Now that we are not in the Dragon City camp. Who knows what Lu Jin did? What happened? One more person, one more helper." Bai Chio was even more worried about his father. Bai Ji sighed. "Your temper is too impulsive. You still need to temper yourself. If you follow me, you will only drag me down." The veins on Bai Chio's forehead popped out. What kind of father was this? Couldn't he be more tactful with his words? How could he be so tactful with his words? Bai Ji wrote, "Lu Jin is a sinister person. If he set you up and used you to threaten me, I can only put righteousness before family." Bai Chio did not say anything. "I will stay. He must have a fake father." After a few days, Gong Dai could move his body slightly. But once he moved, his muscles would become very sore. This poison was really overbearing. Gong Dai was annoyed that he was poisoned, but he also felt that he was indeed poisoned. As expected, the royal sister was his only weakness. Lo Chi put Gong Dai on the wheelchair that he had rushed to make in the past few days. He felt that his prince was really powerful. He knew everything. Then, they went down to the dungeon. Xueqi and Xuezhan were not injured, but they were very nervous. This was because they knew that once Gong Dai came, they would be in trouble. Xueqi was calmer. After living for so long, she had already disregarded life and death. But Xuezhan was different. He was not worried about himself, but he was worried that Xueqi would not be able to withstand Gong Dai's torture. "Prince, you came to the dungeon to see me. I'm really flattered, cough, cough." Xueqi sat in the dungeon and looked at Gong Dai. She was not afraid at all. "Old Madam Xue, you are quite calm. I guess you don't fear death anymore." "Of course, I don't fear death." Xueqi closed her eyes and accepted her fate. However, when Xuezhan, who was in another dungeon, saw this, he said angrily, "Gong Dai, If you dare to harm even a hair on my madam's head, I will surely bury Gong Yimo with her." A cold glint flickered in Gong Dai's eyes as he looked at Shueishan. "You are Lu Ye's Lord of the Holy Lake, yet you have such a strong, murderous aura despite your age. It seems like I have been too lenient with you." After he spoke, Gong Dai waved his hand, and some people walked into Xue Qi's dungeon. They didn't care whether their subordinates were white-haired old men or not. As long as Gong Dai gave them an order, they would not hesitate to kill them. "Gong Dai, don't you dare!" Shueishan, who was still in the dungeon, glared at Gong Dai ferociously. "Madam is Gong Yimo's grandmother. If you dare to harm her, Gong Yimo will not let you off." Gong Dai chuckled. "It seems like you don't understand, royal sister." Chapter 456. At this moment, Xueqi opened her eyes and looked over. She heard Gong Dai continue speaking. "In royal sister's heart, there are only two kinds of people. They are outsiders and her own people." Gong Dai looked coldly at the old lady. "Granny Xue, who do you think you are to royal sister?" Xueqi sighed. "We are just one step behind each other. Cough, cough. You can kill me or torture me as you wish." "Madam," Shueishan was unwilling to accept this. He had come here with his madam to make Gong Dai lower his guard. They had made ample preparations, and they had assumed that they would be able to take down Gong Dai. Moreover, didn't Gong Dai say that he cared a lot about Gong Yimo's matter? But even in such a situation, he hadn't fallen into their trap. "Gong Dai, you don't care about Gong Yimo at all. Otherwise, why would you be alerted so quickly? This is impossible." Shueishan couldn't understand why they had lost, and he was unwilling to accept this. They hadn't shown any malice toward Gong Yimo, and his madam was Gong Yimo's grandmother. So, why didn't Gong Dai care about them at all? Gong Dai didn't feel like explaining this to them, since they had learned about what had happened to royal sister before him. He had suspected that the Snow Clan was involved in this matter. Moreover, they had seen the Snow Clan's underground sacrificial ceremony. How many good people would use such a cruel and twisted sacrificial ceremony? It was no wonder that the Snow Clan had been exterminated. "Do it." Gong Dai watched calmly as his subordinates tied up Xueqi. Xueqi didn't even have the strength to truss a chicken. She was old, and her body wasn't good. When she was tied up, she was in so much pain that she started sweating. When Shueishan saw this, his eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Gong Dai had a headache because of Shueishan. Since they had dared to come here, they should have been prepared to fail and be killed. But before that, they could still play with them. When Shueishan saw that Xueqi was tied up on a human frame and that his martial arts were sealed, he was so anxious that he started sweating. Gong Dai said, "It's not impossible for me to let her go, but I want the antidote." He couldn't wait another month. He was going to look for the royal sister right now. The royal sister was the most dishonest of all. If he didn't watch her, who knew what she would do? But Shueishan's old face was tense. After a while, he said, "There is no antidote." "No?" Gong Dai raised his eyebrows slightly. On the other side, the guard immediately made his move, and a whip landed on the old woman's body. The old woman was quite strong-willed. She only cried out in pain and did not beg for mercy. "Gong Dai." Shueishan grabbed the bars of the cell with both hands, his fingers almost digging into the wood. "There really is no antidote. They didn't give me the antidote. Moreover, this poison wouldn't kill people. It would only make them unconscious. You haven't been poisoned too deeply. With a godly doctor around, you'll be fine for a month or so. Why do you need an antidote?" Gong Dai was unmoved. He waved his hand and signaled them to continue whipping. A suppressed cry of pain could be heard. Gong Dai's face was hidden in the darkness, so no one could see his emotions. He was really whipping. He didn't care that his opponent was an old woman who couldn't resist at all. A person like him didn't have any bottom line or principles. There were only two kinds of people who could be touched, and those who couldn't. Shueishan looked at the whip landing on Xueqi's body. Her clothes were dyed red with blood, and he wished he could take her place. His eyes were bloodshot, and his voice was hoarse. "There really isn't any antidote. Gong Dai, I really don't have the antidote." Shuejian's voice was close to begging. Gong Dai ordered the guards to whip Shuejian a few more times. When he saw that Shuejian was in so much pain that his whole body was trembling, he finally believed him and ordered the guards to stop. So, there really isn't any antidote. Gong Dai sighed. He felt that it was a pity. Shuejian wished he could bite him to death. Gong Dai did this just to test whether he was telling the truth or not. Did he have any humanity left in him? Madame was already so old. Didn't he know what it meant to be soft-hearted? Shueqi's head was lowered, and it seemed like she had fainted. Gong Dai wasn't worried at all. So, let's change the question. Shuejian looked at him cautiously. Why did you poison her? Why did you want to harm the royal sister? The royal sister was Shueqi's child. Wasn't Shueqi a member of the Snow Clan? Why did he hate her so much? Shuejian gritted his teeth. He couldn't answer this question. You can't answer? Gong Dai raised his finger. The guards in the prison also raised their whips. If he didn't answer, Madame would surely die. Shuejian closed his eyes. This matter has nothing to do with the Snow Clan. It was me and Madame who wanted to do this. Oh, Gong Dai believed him a little. After all, if everyone had agreed, they wouldn't have had to take such a risk. Even if this plan had a high possibility of success. Gong Dai looked at his hand and smiled bitterly. The reason? What could they gain by doing this? It's all Gong Yimo's fault. Shuejian said angrily. She was a child of the Snow Clan, but she recognized a thief as her father. She even made the Daiyu state prosper step by step. All of this was built on the bones of the Snow Clan's people. Since the Snow Clan allowed her to be born, the Snow Clan should kill her for betraying the country. Gong Dai finally understood that the two of them were hostile to the royal sister. That so-called holy stone wasn't a good thing. Luckily, the royal sister didn't fall for it. As for whether the other members of the Snow Clan were good or bad, he would see in the future. Moreover, this person kept saying that the royal sister was a child of the Snow Clan. Gong Dai suppressed the restlessness in his heart and said coldly, You want to kill the royal sister because of this? Gong Dai sneered. Do I look like I'm easy to fool? Shuejian's heart shivered. However, this was the only thing he could say. Even if he had to die, he couldn't say anything. Believe it or not, Gong Yimo is wary of the Snow Clan. That's why we asked you to threaten her. Unfortunately, we were wrong. This is the truth. Gong Dai didn't believe it and ordered them to continue beating her. At this time, Shueqi had already fainted. However, the whip marks on her body were real injuries. Gong Dai, Shuejian gritted his teeth. I didn't lie to you. I really didn't lie to you. Stop it. Gong Dai sat there with his eyes closed. If he didn't tell them to stop, how could they stop? Anyway, even if they were beaten to death, they deserved to die for daring to attack him. Gong Dai, Shuejian couldn't hold it in anymore. You asked me because you wanted to know if Gong Yimo was a descendant of the Daiyu state. I really have a way to prove it. Stop it. Gong Ju opened his eyes and stared at him with an imperceptible brilliance. Oh, let's hear it. Shuejian gritted his teeth. If you want me to say it, I can. However, I said that you can't kill us. Gong Dai smiled. That depends on whether I'm satisfied with what you say. The muscles on Shuejian's face were twitching. No matter how unwilling he was, he could only tear his clothes apart and take out something from the interlayer. Gong Yi squinted and looked at it. It looked like a small piece of parchment. This is the Snow Clan's treasure map. His hands were trembling. However, he thought that losing the map was better than losing his wife. Therefore, he took out the map and bit his finger in front of Gong Dai. Then, he dripped his blood on the map. Chapter 457. A strange thing happened. The map could absorb blood. When the blood seeped into the map, the lines on the map appeared. Only the blood of the Snow Clan can reveal the map's true form. Only the Snow Clan can open the Snow Clan's treasure. This map can prove Gong Yimo's bloodline. Pure Snow Clan blood can seep into the map, but other people's blood cannot. When the blood dries up, the map will disappear. You can try. Lo Chi, who was standing beside Gong Dai, quickly walked over and took the map. He bit his finger and dripped his blood on it. As expected, the blood could not seep into the map. But when Lo Chi smeared the blood of the unconscious old Madame Shui on the map, it was instantly absorbed. More lines appeared on the map. It really was a map. Can you let Madame go now? The Snow Clan suppressed their anger and asked. Gong Dai nodded. I said I won't kill you, so I won't go back on my word. But since you were so useful, I will need you when I go to the Snow Clan's treasure. So you can stay as guests. Shuizhan was speechless. He already knew that Gong Dai would not let them go so easily. But as long as he did not torture them, Madame Shuizhan really could not stand Gong Dai's Zhao prison. Gong Dai received a satisfactory answer and left the prison. Only the Snow Clan could do it. When Gong Dai came out, the first thing he did was to have Lo Chi secretly capture a few Snow Clan members. Daiyu State still had many Snow Clan members who were willing to submit. In the end, they became citizens of Daiyu State. Those who were older were the so-called pure Snow Clan blood. Lo Chi obeyed and left. Gong Dai did not stay idle. In this period of time, his body could not move much, but his brain was still working quickly. He looked at the map and drew out the most suitable routes for each region. He did not forget that he was here to fix the roads. As for the royal sister, Gong Dai finally sighed, but the corners of his mouth were slightly raised, with a trace of a smile and helplessness. If the poison couldn't be cured at once, he couldn't leave because his martial arts were temporarily suppressed. His muscles were sore and he had no strength. However, he had a lot of enemies, so he really couldn't find the royal sister now. He really wanted to be with the royal sister, but he had to be healthy. Otherwise, the royal sister would have to protect him. Wouldn't he be a burden to her? Gong Dai was reluctant. Therefore, he wrote a letter to Gong Yimo, saying that he was fine and that she should not worry. Before sending the letter, Gong Dai caressed the letter, his heart filled with love. He was such a cold person, it was really difficult for him to show such a gentle side. If royal sister really wasn't his biological sister and they had nothing to do with each other, then they could have two adorable children. They could have a daughter who looked like royal sister and a son who could protect their daughter forever. That would be very blissful. A family of 4, his and Mo's home. Gong Yimo suddenly felt a chill and rubbed her arms. Ignoring the matters of the Dragon City barracks, she brought Bai Chio and followed Si Wuyin to the capital of Jade Palace, Jade City. It was worth mentioning that Si Wuyin and the Empress Dowager were fighting fiercely in private. However, on the surface, they still lived together in the same Jade Palace. Upon entering the city, Gong Yimo felt oppressed. Although the Jade Palace was bustling as usual, the hidden turbulence made people feel as if they were treading on thin ice. Si Wuyin's carriage was very big and luxurious. Gong Yimo sat in his carriage and looked out, trying her best to ignore the lunatic beside her. He actually refused to let Gong Yimo and Bai Chio ride together. He was really sick. Gong Yimo looked out of the window, but she could feel Si Wuyin's gaze sweeping across her body like a ray. It was as if he was evaluating her value, but also as if he was hesitating about something. At this moment, there was a commotion on the street. It turned out that someone was dragging a woman into the carriage. The woman did not comply and let out a terrified cry. Si Wuyin frowned. Who was so daring? His subordinates clearly understood him and quickly went to check. They quickly returned. Your Majesty, it's the Marquis of Changjun. He seems to be drunk. A woman accidentally bumped into him, and he took a fancy to her. He wants to forcefully drag her into his residence. The voice of the person who reported became softer and softer. Because of this, it was obvious that the other party did not put Si Wuyin in his eyes. It was no wonder. The Marquis of Changjun was the nephew of the Empress Dowager. Usually, the Empress Dowager doted on him. Therefore, he was not of the same bloodline as the Emperor. Naturally, he did not put the Emperor in his eyes. Go and save her. Seeing Si Wuyin's cold expression, Gong Yimo raised her eyebrows. She did not expect this guy to have a righteous side. However, his confidant Gu Sei did not agree. Your Majesty, it's best not to interfere with the Marquis of Changjun's matters. This person is powerful and has some ability. Maybe we can win him over and he will be of help. After all, at this time, they should fight for any power and not offend them. Si Wuyin did not speak. Gusei sighed in his heart. If only the general was here. He would definitely persuade the emperor to turn a blind eye. Perhaps he would even send a few more women to the Marquis of Changjun to win him over. At this time, a man's laughter came from the other side. It turned out that the Marquis of Changjun was deliberately teasing the woman. He did not allow anyone to interfere and only let the guards surround the woman to prevent her from running away. Then, he personally went to catch her. The woman was so scared that she cried and screamed, but no one dared to save her. Si Wuyin's face became uglier when he heard the lewd laughter. In the end, he smiled gently. Can't offend him? Si Wuyin thought about this word carefully. Go and tell the Marquis of Changjun that I have taken a fancy to this woman. Your Majesty, Gusei looked conflicted. The Marquis of Changjun was famous for being a scoundrel. If the emperor interfered, he might be humiliated. Why aren't you going? Si Wuyin narrowed his eyes. Gusei had no choice but to bite the bullet and go. Gong Yimou watched. She originally thought that if one was not capable enough, one should not meddle. However, the woman was pitiful. If Si Wuyin really wanted to save her, then so be it. After all, she would not be the one to bear the consequences. As expected, the Marquis of Changjun heard this and asked loudly, What, Your Majesty? He tried his best to look behind him with his small eyes. Sure enough, he saw Si Wuyin's carriage. His eyes lit up, and he swallowed his saliva. Your Majesty also likes this girl? At this time, he had already caught the woman. His fat hand turned the woman's face to look from left to right. No matter how he looked, she was only pretty. The woman was so scared that she trembled. She was so ashamed that she wanted to die. It seemed that the little emperor could not stand to see this, and came to find trouble. The Marquis of Changjun rolled his eyes. When he thought of Si Wuyin's face, he smiled maliciously. Originally, His Majesty's decree. As a subject, I must obey. However, I did not even see His Majesty's shadow. Who knows if you're fooling me? Fake the decree? Chapter 458. Gusei knew that this person was difficult to deal with, so he said impatiently, Do you think you can see His Majesty just because you want to? The Marquis of Changjun was not angry when he heard this. He kissed the face of the weeping woman in his arms and said with narrowed eyes, Then I have no choice. Do you think I will listen to a small soldier like you? Many people could not stand it anymore. How could this person be so shameless? However, they could not afford to offend him because of his high status. They could only sneak a glance and then avoid him. Suddenly, there was a cry of surprise from the crowd. The Marquis of Changjun opened his eyes wide and looked up. He saw a sea of red coming from afar. Even the sun lost its color. He immediately threw away the woman in his arms and rushed forward a few steps. When he saw Si Wuyin, he first looked at his face greedily and then bowed. However, his eyes never left Si Wuyin's face when he bowed. His high and mighty appearance was really impulsive. He really wanted to see him fall into the dust, his red clothes stained with blood, and his humble appearance begging for mercy. Your Majesty, the Marquis of Changjun smiled. Si Wuyin did not want to say more. I like this girl, but you don't seem to be willing to give her up? Of course not. The Marquis of Changjun smiled apologetically. Let's not talk about this girl. As long as Your Majesty likes her, I will send 10 beauties to the palace tonight. No need. Si Wuyin was too lazy to talk to this person. He ordered Gusei to take the girl and leave. However, the Marquis of Changjun was drunk and lustful. How could he let the girl go so easily? He tried to grab Si Wuyin's hand, but Si Wuyin pushed his hand away. Dongji, how dare you? Si Wuyin glared at him. He used his handkerchief to wipe the place where the Marquis of Changjun's hand. His face was full of disgust. If not for the fact that this person was still useful, he really wanted to chop off his hand. Marquis Dongji of Changjun was still reminiscing about the feeling of Si Wuyin's delicate skin. It was said that in order to keep Si Wuyin's skin fresh and tender, Ani had bathed him with a special potion since he was young. As a result, even though he was a man, his skin was smoother and more tender than a woman's. It even had its own fragrance. It really made people unable to part with it. Your Majesty, a chance encounter is not as good as a chance encounter. This place is not far from the Marquis's mansion. Why don't you rest at my place? Si Wuyin was so angry that he laughed. Even if it was a cold laugh, it still made Dong Ji stare blankly. He wanted nothing more than to drag the emperor back to his manor and play with him. He was not afraid of the emperor. If the emperor had poisoned him, his aunt would be able to cure him. Moreover, he had great power in his hands. As long as this little emperor has some brains, he would know that I can't offend him too much. However, if the little emperor is willing to offer himself, it's not impossible to make him change sides. Ha ha ha. Very good. You're not afraid of death. In that moment, Si Wuyin didn't care if it was useful or not. He wanted this stupid pig to die. He wanted him to die right now. Dong Ji thought it through and became even more courageous, dying under a peony flower. Being a ghost is also romantic. Si Wuyin took a deep breath. The poison arrow in his hand was ready to be shot again. This was a poison that sealed the throat the moment it touched blood. No matter how powerful Mother Empress was, she couldn't bring the dead back to life. Right now, he didn't think about the consequences. In any case, between him and Mother Empress, it was already a situation where one side would not rest until one side died. The Marquis of Changjun really has eyes but can't see. Suddenly, a female voice sounded. It made everyone present, including the passers-by, stop and look over. It was clearly cursing, but when it was said by that clear voice, Dong Ji didn't feel angry at all. He saw a woman lift the curtain of the carriage and come down. If Si Wuyin's red clothes were like the sun, then Gong Yimo's blue clothes were like the sky and the sea. There was a kind of indescribable calmness and grace that made her unapproachable. Seeing her gaze drift over, Dong Ji's body instantly went numb. She was like a fairy, but she was only like this. Who are you? He couldn't help but ask, and Si Wuyin slightly frowned. He didn't like Gong Yimo being stared at by this stupid pig. Gong Yimo softly laughed. Is it important who I am? Isn't it enough that I'm good-looking? Her slightly raised voice made Dong Ji's saliva flow. You're right. You're right. Dong Ji smiled at the emperor. Your Majesty, you're too unkind. Such a beauty, you actually want to enjoy it alone? He walked towards Gong Yimo step by step, saying, Your Majesty, this subject will definitely offer over 100 beauties later. As for this one, she'll belong to me. He pounced towards Gong Yimo, but Gong Yimo turned around and dodged. Her voice carried a smile. The Marquis of Changjun should think clearly. I'm not those ordinary girls. If you touch me, the consequences will be very serious. But this tone was so charming. How was it serious? Dong Ji only felt that his eyes weren't enough. How could there be such a beautiful woman? If it's serious, then it's serious. This Marquis just wants you. As he spoke, he pounced again. But this time, Gong Yimo didn't dodge. Instead, she waved her hand back. A fragrant wind blew over. It was supposed to be a beautiful scene, but a miserable scream rang out. When everyone came back to their senses, Dong Ji was already rolling on the ground in pain. The scary thing was that his left hand had been cut off from the wrist. And the severed hand fell to the side and was still twitching. This time, the guards who were originally prepared to watch a good show all drew their swords and quickly surrounded Gong Yimo. Someone dragged Dong Ji away. He still hadn't fainted and kept shouting, Which kill her? Quickly kill her. Gong Yimo's dagger was stained with blood. Her sleeves were also stained with blood. It was like plum blossoms blooming, too beautiful to behold. She slowly wiped off the blood on her dagger and innocently said, He was the one who said that under the peony flower, he was willing to die. Moreover, is this consort someone that he's qualified to touch? At this time, Si Wuyin had already seen a good show. He was very satisfied. It was better for Gong Yimo to make a move than him, so he laughed. How dare you? She is Daiyu State's, Gu State's eldest princess. She is Zhen's honored guest. Why aren't you retreating? But she injured the Marquis, Someone shouted unwillingly. Gong Yimo walked forward step by step towards Dong Ji. The guards were supposed to stop her retreated step by step for some reason. She seemed to have an invisible force. When she took a step forward, it made people retreat in fear. So much so that she walked unimpeded in front of Dong Ji, scaring him so much that his face turned pale. "Ah, what are you still standing there for? Quickly take her down." He was in so much pain that he was sweating profusely. When the guards heard this, they stepped forward again. However, Gong Yimo used her hidden sword and pushed them back. In the next second, the tip of her sword was pointed at Dong Ji's nose. The sword trembled slightly. Dong Ji was originally howling in pain, but at this moment, he endured the pain and didn't dare to move. "Don't hurt the Marquis," someone shouted, but no one dared to take a step closer. Indeed, like master, like servant. Many commoners were delighted to see the despicable Marquis Changjuan's hand being chopped off. They watched from the shadows without blinking. Gong Yimo pointed her sword at him and asked with a smile, "This consort is Dai Yu State's most honorable princess. My status is comparable to the crown prince. Who are you? You disrespected this consort, so this consort chopped off your hand. Do you have any complaints?" Chapter 459. Do you have any complaints? Do you dare to have any complaints? Dong Ji was in so much pain that he couldn't think. But at that moment, the aura that erupted from Gong Yimo's body made him tremble. Whether he was angry or begging for mercy, all of it was stuck in his throat. After a while, Gong Yimo put away her sword and gave a light smile. "This princess is in a good mood today, so I won't kill you. But next time, you won't have this kind of luck." As she said this, she turned to leave. Dong Ji suddenly came back to his senses. The pain and resentment won over his fear. He gritted his teeth and shouted, "Someone come. This witch injured this Marquis. Capture her." Dong Ji's 20 guards looked at each other. They normally helped the Marquis of Changjun do evil and had never lost a single time. But today, this was clearly an iron plate. Were they going to kick it? The hesitation of his subordinates made Dong Ji even angrier. His head was covered in sweat as he kicked the person next to him. "Scram! If you don't catch her, you can all die." His words of deterrence still had an effect. His bodyguard approached Gong Yimo, clenching his swords tightly. They clearly didn't fight. They didn't understand why they were so afraid of her. Perhaps she was too decisive when she cut off his hand? Gong Yimo was a bit impatient. She tilted her head and looked at Dong Ji. "Have you thought it through? This princess is the princess of Dai Yu State. Pay." Dong Ji had never suffered such a big loss. He had to make this woman pay with her blood. "I don't care where you're the princess." He sucked in air from the pain, but the viciousness in his eyes became stronger. "In Yuchi, in this Marquis eyes, you're just a slut who's played too much. Go die." He wanted to peel off her skin and pull out her tendons. But before he did that, he wanted to play with her from top to bottom, then throw her to the servants to play with. What princess? In Yuchi, he had the final say. Si Weiyin originally wanted to intervene because Marquis Changjun couldn't die in the hands of Gong Yimo in broad daylight. However, after hearing Dong Ji's arrogant words, he snorted and decided not to interfere. If he wanted to die, then so be it. Don't blame others for seeking death. Gong Yimo glanced at Si Weiyin and said to Dong Ji, "How arrogant. Yuchi, do you have the final say?" However, Dong Ji no longer had the strength to answer her. He directly ordered his subordinates to attack. Seeing that the matter was getting out of hand, some of the commoners did not dare to watch anymore. They did not know what would happen to the princess from Dai Yu State. However, when they thought of the Empress Dowager behind the Marquis of Changjun, they felt that things were getting out of hand. Moreover, the Marquis of Changjun usually bullied men and women, committing all kinds of crimes. Every day, fresh female corpses would be thrown out of the Marquis mansion. This princess, what a pity. Because of fear, the streets suddenly became deserted. Dong Ji's subordinates had already drawn their swords and slashed at Gong Yimo. These people had a strange fear of Gong Yimo, so they did not treat her as a woman at all. Since they were bullying her, Gong Yimo would not be passive. She directly killed the first person who rushed in front of her without hesitation. Seeing that the princess killed people without hesitation, the remaining people were a little scared. However, the Marquis of Changchun was still screaming behind them. They did not dare to retreat. Just when they were in a dilemma, they heard an announcement. The Empress Dowager has arrived. The Empress Dowager had arrived. A series of footsteps were heard. Following that, the Imperial Guards sealed off the streets. Originally, it was just a matter of kidnapping a commoner. However, in the end, it became a duel between the Empress Dowager and the Emperor. This time, Si Wuyin could no longer watch the show. He strode forward and bowed to the gorgeous carriage. Your son respectfully welcomes the Empress Dowager. When he said this, his attitude was very respectful. It seemed that the relationship between mother and son was very good. Dong Ji's guards took the opportunity to stop and drag Dong Ji away to treat his injuries. Gong Yimo also took the opportunity to put away her sword. The white curtain was pulled open layer by layer, revealing a graceful and luxurious woman. She was waving a feather fan in her hand. She did not shout and said slowly with half-closed eyes, "My son, you just entered the city and you already made such a scene. Why?" Si Wuyin stood up and smiled wickedly. Your son wanted to enter the city quietly. However, I encountered the Dong family committing a crime on the street. That's why I took action. Committing a crime? Dong Luani looked down at Si Wuyin arrogantly. How is kidnapping a woman considered committing a crime? For an ant-like woman, you actually injured your own cousin. Don't you feel ashamed? As she spoke, one of the Imperial Guards carried a woman forward. That woman was the girl who had escaped in the chaos. Unexpectedly, she had fallen into the hands of the Empress Dowager. This meant that the Empress Dowager had been waiting for a long time. The Imperial Guard let go, and the woman fell to the ground. At this time, she was covered in blood. It was obvious that she had been beaten up. However, she could not help but crawl towards Si Wuyin. It was as if she knew that only Si Wuyin was sincere in saving her here. Save me." She lay on the ground and begged. Si Wuyin frowned and bent down to help the woman up. Empress Dowager, she is a citizen of Yuqi. She is not an ant. Sitting high on the palanquin, Dong Luani snorted softly. Waving the feather fan in her hand, she sighed and said, "You've done everything you can to please those old antiques. Look at what kind of pedantic ideas they've taught you. My good child, those are all wrong." Si Wuyin said neither humbly nor arrogantly. "They taught me that water can carry a boat or sink it. Since they are citizens of Yuqi, they are my responsibility." Dong Luani narrowed her eyes and covered her mouth with her fan. "Then did they teach you that you must always be vigilant?" Si Wuyin suddenly became alert. However, it was too late. His body was so weak. How could he avoid the intentional attack of the person beside him? Although the dagger missed, it still left a long bloody wound on Si Wuyin's chest. Si Wuyin covered the wound and looked at the girl beside him in disbelief. The dagger fell to the ground. She knelt on the ground and cried. I'm sorry." She said that if I don't do this, she will sell me to the brothel. "I'm sorry, Your Majesty." Gusei rushed forward and sealed Si Wuyin's acupoints to stop the bleeding. "Ayaya." Dong Luani, who was watching a good show, laughed. "Look, how long has it been since you left Mother's side? How did you become so kind? Mother once said that no one can be trusted. People who wag their tails and beg you 1 second can give you a fatal blow the next second. Look at you. The more you live, the more backward you become." Si Wuyin gritted his teeth. He was so angry that his whole body trembled. However, he could not bear it. Thank you. Thank you for your teachings, Mother." He lowered his eyes, which were filled with madness and resentment. "Raise your head," Dong Luani ordered sternly. Si Wuyin took a deep breath and raised his head. His eyes were big and narrow, but they were filled with resentment and disapproval. Dong Luani looked at him carefully and sighed after a while. "My son, how many times have I told you that you don't need sympathy and righteousness? When you were resentful, your eyes were so beautiful. Unlike now, they're so disgusting." Chapter 460. At this time, Dongji's injury was bandaged and brought to the Empress Dowager. His face was pale as he complained while crying. "Aunt, you have to seek justice for your nephew. Your nephew lost an arm. How can your nephew serve you in the future?" At this time, the girl's cries annoyed Dong Wani, and she frowned. "Bring her here." The imperial guards obeyed and hurriedly dragged the bloodied girl to the Empress Dowager. Her face was full of fear, not knowing what the Empress Dowager wanted to do. She widened her eyes and sobbed. "Empress Dowager, this humble girl has done it. Don't hit me." She was frightened like a bird startled by the twang of a bow. Dong Wani glanced at her and then looked away in disdain. "Gee, you lost an arm because of this trash?" The danger in Dong Wani's tone made Dong Ji shrink his neck. In addition, his wrist was still very painful after the medicine was applied, so he didn't answer immediately. Dong Wani smiled and asked the emperor, "Imperial son, look, this kind of woman who repaid kindness with enmity. What are you waiting for? Aijia will give you a chance. Kill her." "Imperial mother." Si Yin widened his eyes, and his lips were slightly pale. "Return to the palace. Zhen is tired." But how could Dong Wani let it go? She shook her head. "Imperial son, when did you learn to be soft-hearted? She is a woman, but she caused your cousin to lose his arm and you to be injured. Why don't you punish her? You were still the same as before, vicious and merciless. Unfortunately, you went out and came back disobedient. You made Aijia very unhappy. When Aijia is unhappy, Aijia likes to torment people, such as amputating this woman's limbs. Don't worry, if she doesn't die after her limbs are amputated, Aijia will spare her." The more she spoke, the more she laughed. "No, no." The girl was clearly frightened by Dong Wani's gloomy words. She looked at the surrounding imperial guards and finally crawled to Si Yin for help. Your Majesty, save me. I didn't do it on purpose, I didn't." She cried again. She had just come out to buy some goods, but suffered such an unexpected disaster. Even if she died, her parents would have no way to redress her injustice. Si Yin pulled the hem of his clothes out of her hands. Looking at her dirty appearance, he frowned slightly. "Imperial Mother, since you've already said that she's an ant-like existence, why waste your time arguing with her?" A heavy pressure came from the palanquin. The Empress Dowager was displeased. She covered half of her face with her feather fan. "What if I insist on being calculative?" Her gaze fell coldly on the trembling girl, as if she was looking at a dead person. "Either you kill her with one strike, or I chop her into a human swine and give it to you. My son, what do you choose?" At this moment, what choice could he make? They were surrounded by the Empress Dowager's men. They had surrounded the place, but Si Yin had only brought a dozen men with him. How could he choose? At this moment, an imperial guard pulled out his saber and handed it to Si Yin with both hands, forcing him to do so. Seeing Si Yin clench his teeth in embarrassment, Dong Wani narrowed her eyes and looked at him with indescribable satisfaction. Since he was young, she had used Si Yin as a tool. She forced him to kill people and poison people. She forced him to become more and more ruthless. Seeing that his claws were getting sharper by the day, she damaged his body so that he could no longer practice martial arts. This way, he would never be able to hurt his master. Wasn't it very interesting? She just didn't expect that, after the wolf cub went out once, his originally molded temperament would change back. He even wanted to resist her. How could she not be angry? Seeing Si Yin pick up the saber, and the fiercer his gaze, the more satisfied she was. It was as if the obedient him of the past had returned. She really missed the past. Si Yin lowered his head and looked at the girl who was wagging her tail at his feet. This was the person who had attacked him mercilessly a second ago. Now, she was so pitiful that he could no longer sympathize with her. Perhaps this was the Empress Dowager's scheme. She wanted to extinguish his sympathy and make him completely lose his humanity. How could this be? He raised the saber. Wasn't it just a person? What was there to regret about dying? At this moment, he didn't seem to understand why he wanted to save her. Really, what a great show. A sudden voice interrupted. Si Wuyen's originally red eyes became cold and clear. He looked over and saw a touch of blue. It was incompatible with the blood red on his body, but it was so calm and clean. Very few people could suppress a color like peacock blue. That gorgeous embroidered skirt and the decorative jadeite on her body. As long as she appeared, she would definitely be the most eye-catching color in the crowd. Moreover, her skin was delicate and white, and her facial features were even more stunning. Therefore, from the beginning, Dong Wani deliberately ignored Gong Yimo, who asked Gong Yimo to try to cut off Dong Ji's hand as a warning to others. Since that was the case, Dong Wani also wanted to do the same. A princess from Dayu State dared to be so arrogant in Yuchi. Did she really think that there was no one in Yuchi? Seeing Gong Yimo walk step by step towards her, Dong Wani smiled coldly. I was wondering who it was. So it's the princess of Gu State from Dayu State. I apologize for not noticing you just now. Gong Yimo didn't care at all. The Empress Dowager is very busy every day. It's normal that you don't remember a small character like me. However, may I ask, what wrong did this woman commit that you want to kill her on the spot? Dong Wani leaned on the couch of the sedan and fanned herself. She asked softly. She tried to assassinate the emperor in public. Does her crime not warrant death? When the woman heard this, she knew that crying was useless. She shouted resentfully, "It's you? You forced me to do this." Oh, Dong Wani raised her brows slightly. Her every move was seductive. Then why don't you die if I want you to? This sentence was like a fishbone stuck in the woman's throat. She couldn't say a word. Gong Yimo smiled and nodded. The Empress Dowager is right. She offended the Emperor of Yuchi. She does deserve death. Following Gong Yimo's words, the woman's heart turned to ashes. She felt that it would be difficult to escape death today. She would rather be killed by the Emperor. That would be more straightforward. However, Gong Yimo frowned slightly and said, "Speaking of this, I also have a matter that I would like the Empress Dowager to uphold justice." "What is it?" Dong Wani asked calmly. At this moment, Dong Ji didn't dare to speak. He shrank his neck. Every time he saw the Empress Dowager, he was like a mouse seeing a cat. He didn't dare to act rashly. Just like today's matter. The Empress Dowager protected him on the surface, but she would definitely punish him behind his back. And the other party wouldn't let him off easily. As expected, Gong Yimo pointed at Dong Ji and smiled. This person was very arrogant just now. He saw that I was beautiful and wanted to do something to me. He offended me. Since this woman offended the Emperor, I think this result is also suitable for Marquis Changjun. What do you think? Dong Wani stopped fanning herself. Chapter 461. Without waiting for Dong Wani to say anything, Gong Yimo continued with an overbearing smile. Or is it that in the Empress Dowager's eyes, His Majesty is His Majesty, and I am me? A foreign princess is not worth mentioning. So what if I offended her? These words were a little heart-wrenching. Dong Wani's cold eyes swept over Dong Ji. He was so frightened that he hurriedly crawled up from the shelf and knelt down. Aunt, I'm innocent. I didn't even touch her finger. She even chopped off one of my hands. Whoa, I beg Aunt to uphold justice. Dong Wani glared fiercely at Dong Ji. He really couldn't do anything right. Then she looked at Gong Yimo, who was smiling calmly, and said coldly, "He offended you, so you chopped off one of his hands. That was already a punishment. But this woman is different. She wanted to kill the emperor. According to the law, 9 generations of her family can be executed." At this time, Dong Wani was really angry. She had to kill that lowly woman to dampen Si Wuyen's spirit. She wanted the world to see who had the final say in Yuchi. But this princess of Dayu State was really difficult to deal with. She couldn't help but be angry. Gong Yimo wasn't afraid of her threat at all. Instead, she nodded in agreement. The Empress Dowager is right. This kind of person deserves to die 1,000 times. But just now, the Marquis of Changjun clearly knew that I was a princess. He offended me and was taught a lesson by me. He still held a grudge and sent his subordinates to kill me. If I didn't have some tricks up my sleeves, I'm afraid I would have died in Yuchi. Offending one's superiors and trying to provoke a conflict between two states is also a crime punishable by 9 generations of execution, right? I'm sure the Empress Dowager is impartial and understands the seriousness of this matter. She definitely won't side with her own nephew and disregard the country's righteousness. You. Dong Wani slammed the fan on her leg. She was so angry that she couldn't speak. Gong Yimo was all smiles, but she didn't budge an inch. It seemed like they were talking about whether or not to kill the pitiful woman on the ground, but the nature was different. It involved not only the struggle between the emperor and the empress, but also the struggle between the Empress Dowager and Gong Yimo. If Gong Yimo made a move today, this woman would still die. In the future, Empress Dowager Yu Qi would not put her in her eyes and would be even more unbridled. However, if this woman did not die today, the Empress Dowager would probably have to reconsider Gong Yimo's weight. After a while, Dong Wani finally caught her breath and sneered. Your Highness, you have a sharp tongue. Unfortunately, in Yu Qi, you can't twist the truth just by talking. Is that so? Gong Yimo's gorgeous blue dress fluttered in the wind, and her smile was even more carefree. But I'm not exaggerating at all. I have what Imperial Father wants the most in my hands. I'm the future Emperor of Daiyu State, and my brother, the Crown Prince, also values me very much. My 9th brother can't bear to see me being wronged. The new Emperor of Yuheng is also my brother. King Lu Yi even sees me as a brother. This is so distressing. If they knew that I was offended in Yu Qi, I don't know if they would let it go. Gong Yimo's words stunned everyone present. Si Wein suddenly burst out laughing. He laughed heartily, completely ignoring Dong Wani's gloomy face. Dong Ji was already scared silly. Now that the medicine was taking effect, his wrist did not hurt as much. However, the people that came out of Gong Yimo's mouth made his heart ache. He was not afraid that Gong Yimo was exaggerating, because this kind of thing could not be said carelessly. Dong Wani's face was gloomy. She remembered that Yuheng had proposed to Gong Yimo not long ago, and that she had solved Lu Ye's food problem. If that was the case, she really had a background, and her mouth was as sharp as a knife. Dong Wani felt that she had underestimated Gong Yimo. The atmosphere was a little tense. Among everyone present, Gong Yimo was probably the most relaxed. Now that the 3 countries were trading, Yu Qi would not dare to offend her for the sake of its future development. Her fearlessness made Dong Wani sigh. Finally, she glared at Gong Yimo and said angrily, Silly child, what are you talking about? Yu Qi rules the country with benevolence. How could it really make things difficult for this girl? Aijiao was just scaring her. Gong Yimo smiled gently. You mean you don't intend to pursue her responsibility? Dong Wani looked like she had a headache. I won't pursue it. This is just a game between me and my son. How could it involve outsiders? Gong Yimo nodded. Her smiling eyes fell on Dong Ji, making the fat on Dong Ji's body tremble. The Empress Dowager is so magnanimous, but I am a little petty. This girl offended me and humiliated me. I can't tolerate it. Gong Yimo's insatiable behavior made Dong Wani's anger surge. The smile on her face cracked. What else do you want? Her tone was full of threats. She was very dissatisfied. Gong Yimo better behave. This was Yu Qi after all. It was not a place where she could jump around as she pleased. Gong Yimo touched her nose. Nothing much, just let him kneel and kowtow. The Empress Dowager was stunned. She did not know why, but she felt relieved. Dong Ji was not having it. Aunt, look at your nephew's hand. Your nephew only said one wrong thing. Not only did his hand get chopped off, but he also has to suffer such humiliation. How can your nephew raise his head in front of his colleagues in the future? The Empress Dowager hesitated. Dong Ji was still useful to her, so she could not be disgraced. Gong Yimo laughed from the side. It turns out that I'm really worthless in Yu Qi. I can't even offend a mere marquis. It seems that in the future, the 3 kingdoms will have to avoid Yu Qi. I really can't afford to offend them, so why not avoid them? Dong Wani's expression finally changed. Why aren't you kneeling? Aunt, Dong Wani glared at him fiercely. The warning in her eyes extinguished Dong Ji's anger. He secretly gritted his teeth in Gong Yimo's direction. This was the first time he knew that a woman could be so difficult to deal with. Not only was she good with her mouth, she was also very good at using her bargaining chips and people's hearts. I'm sorry. He unwillingly knelt in front of Gong Yimo, his eyes full of humiliation. When he thought of the gazes of his colleagues in the future, he wished that he could tear Gong Yimo into pieces. Gong Yimo stood there. Although her attitude was easygoing, she gave people an unapproachable feeling. Do you know what you did wrong? Her voice was like the clouds. Dongji was furious. He had always relied on the Empress Dowager's favor and had never suffered a loss. But today his hand was chopped off just because he wanted to touch a girl. He was filled with hatred. Even more, he hated that he had to kneel here and apologize to his enemy. I shouldn't have tried to take advantage of you. Dongji hid the hatred in his eyes and lowered his head to apologize. What else? Gong Yimo calmly looked at her well-manicured fingertips and then looked at Dong Wani, who was sitting in the sedan with an ugly expression. What else? Dongji was humiliated. He only felt that the surrounding Imperial Guard's gazes were piercing, making him unable to raise his head. Chapter 462. I shouldn't have humiliated you. I shouldn't have sent my guards to offend you. Please forgive me, princess. I drank wine. Gong Yimo pursed her lips and smiled. You should have. And Dongji's face turned red. Even Dong Wani, who was standing at the side, kept waving her fan. She felt that Gong Yimo was deliberately humiliating her. She had to look at the owner before beating the dog. What did she mean? Was she unhappy with her? Dong Wani secretly gritted her teeth. Previously, she had ignored Gong Yimo and forced Si Wuyin to kill someone in front of her. She wanted to tell Gong Yimo that Si Wuyin was not a good partner to work with. Yu Qi was her world. But now, Gong Yimo had forced her to hand over her own nephew and humiliated him again and again. It was a ruthless slap to her own face. Dongji had never suffered such humiliation. Although he was kneeling on the ground, the muscles on his face were trembling. He wanted to bite Gong Yimo to death. I don't know how I have offended you. He straightened his body. His small eyes were filled with ferocity as he stared at Gong Yimo. Please enlighten me, princess. Gong Yimo smiled lightly. As a subject, you didn't respect the emperor and offended your superiors. Isn't that a crime? Si Wuyin was stunned. The smile on his face suddenly turned serious. He looked at Gong Yimo with a cold and complicated gaze. Gong Yimo didn't care and said again, as an official, you humiliated a woman on the street and bullied the people. Isn't that a crime? The woman beside Gong Yimo couldn't hold it in anymore and cried out loudly. She had suffered too much today. Those high and mighty people all treated human lives as grass. Even His Majesty had almost killed her. She didn't expect that the one who saved her in the end was the princess from a neighboring country. You're a member of the royal family, yet you don't lead by example. Instead, you keep making mistakes. Even now, you still don't know where you've gone wrong. Forgive me for being blunt, but your apology is insincere. I won't accept it. After she finished speaking, everyone was stunned. There was no other reason. When Gong Yimo said those words, although her expression was cold, the righteousness that burst out in an instant made everyone present feel ashamed of themselves. Gong Yimo looked straight at Dong Wani and bowed in front of her. My words were rude. If I have offended you, I hope the Empress Dowager can forgive me. In addition, please allow me to pay my respects to you. Long live the Empress Dowager. I am Princess Gong Yimo from Daiyu State. Please take care of me in the future. After bowing, she stood up with a calm attitude. However, Dong Wani sat up straight and stared at her in silence. Their gazes collided. One was angry, one was calm. One was sharp, and the other was calm. It was just a moment of eye contact, but it seemed as if sparks were flying. After a while, Dong Wani sneered. I didn't expect the famous princess of Gu State to be a saint. Gong Yimo didn't deny it and smiled broadly. Sometimes, after being a villain for too long, it's inevitable that I want to change my taste. Unfortunately, I wanted to be a saint since I was young. No one could ignore the weight of her words. Today's scene made Dong Wani very vigilant. She originally wanted to show her power to Gong Yimo, an outsider, but who knew that not only would she be ruthlessly slapped in the face, but she would also stand on the side of righteousness. It seemed that this princess of Dayu State wasn't an easy bone to chew. She was very fierce in her bones, but on the surface, she had the appearance that those sanctimonious ministers liked the most. This kind of woman had to be guarded against. After a long while, the Empress Dowager gave an order. All the imperial guards began to retreat in an orderly manner, as if they were ready to let this matter pass. Before Dong Wani left, she glanced at Gong Yimo and smiled ambiguously. Since the princess has the heart, I'll leave my good-for-nothing son to you. Of course, if you want to talk to me and be my companion, I'm very welcome. Gong Yimo and Si Wuyan bowed at the same time. Farewell, Empress Dowager. Gong Yimo's stubbornness angered Dong Wani. Very good, princess, take care of yourself. With that, she really left. After everyone left, Gong Yimo sighed in relief and glanced at the girl by her feet. Go home. Unexpectedly, the girl was smart. She grabbed Gong Yimo's leg and shook her head repeatedly. No, princess, I've offended the Empress Dowager and will definitely die a horrible death. I can't go home, or else I'll implicate my parents. If the princess doesn't mind, please accept me as your servant. Gong Yimo had a headache and signaled to Si Wuyan to handle it. Si Wuyan handed the girl to Gu Sei, and the two of them boarded the carriage again. For a moment, neither of them spoke. After a while, Si Wuyan suddenly sneered. You must think that I'm very useless. You must be mocking me in your heart. You must think that I'm really useless as the emperor. As he said this, the red on his body seemed to dim. But what could he do? At the beginning of the division, half of the court officials were on the Empress Dowager's side, and the other half were neutral. There were not many people who supported him. They looked down on his background and did not believe him. They thought that it was the Empress Dowager's scheme. In the end, he had to work with General Jadeface to win the loyalty of a few old officials. Only then could he establish himself. However, half of the Imperial Guards were in the hands of the Empress Dowager, and the other half was in the hands of the Empress Dowager's trusted person. This was the most troublesome part for him, so he had always been cautious. The Empress Dowager had many eyes and ears in the imperial city. Gong Yimo looked at him from head to toe. You're quite useless. After 4 years, you're still so passive. Si Wuyan was not convinced that she did not know how to speak. She did not know how difficult his situation was at that time. At the beginning, he could not even leave the palace. Now he had people and soldiers under his command. It was just that he did not have as many as the Empress Dowager. How could he be useless? It was just that it was difficult to be in the imperial city. Gong Yimo looked out of the window and said faintly, If I were you, I wouldn't expose myself so early. I would investigate those officials who are loyal to the Empress Dowager. Si Wuyan sneered. Did he not investigate? It was just that he did not have enough manpower and could not find any evidence. Gong Yimo continued. Then I would plan to send those good-looking sons to the Empress Dowager's bed. Si Wuyan was stunned. He did not understand what Gong Yimo was saying for a long time. Gong Yimo saw his silly look and sighed. Is it difficult to drug them and send them to the Empress Dowager's bed? There are so many people in a family. You can't touch the direct descendants, but you can also touch the concubine's children. Many people are eager to get close to the Empress Dowager. Why not? Moreover, these people are not official yet. The Empress Dowager has never seen them. She would think that you are filial to her. I think you have done this kind of thing before. Wasn't this too mean? Si Wuyan felt as if the door to a new world had been opened for him. He looked at Gong Yimo with burning eyes. Why didn't he think of using this trick in the beginning? Women were indeed sinister. It was impossible to guard against. Chapter 463. Gong Yimo could think of these tricks even with her eyes closed. You can't do it now. You must have shed all pretense of cordiality to get rid of the Empress Dowager. But you can find a few people to secretly seduce those gigolos, or use the excuse of being filial to the Empress Dowager to recruit male pets. The commoners may think you are muddle-headed, but they hate the Empress Dowager. This is the disadvantage of a woman. You don't know how to use it. Si Wuyin was stunned. He never knew that Gong Yimo was such a sinister person. You must know how to make a drug to make a man unable to fall, right? Even if the Empress Dowager's camp is solid, those male pets will definitely need this drug to win the Empress Dowager's favor. If you tamper with it, the Empress Dowager won't be able to guard against it no matter how good her poison skills are. After all, which male pet will tell her that he used a drug? The more Gong Yimo thought about it, the more she felt that Si Wuyin was a paper tiger. He looked evil, but in fact, he hadn't learned the essence of it. Also, Si Wuyin's life wasn't as dark and twisted as his previous life. Although it was twisted, most of it was still intact and could be saved. Si Wuyin stared at Gong Yimo's small mouth. He heard the undisguised disdain in her voice. After a while, he asked a completely unrelated question. You haven't answered me yet. In your heart, do you also look down on me? He frowned slightly. After a while, he sneered. His smile was mocking and evil. Just like those people, I sincerely recruited them, but they laughed at me for being a puppet, a male pet. They said that they disdained to assist me because I didn't deserve it. Si Wuyin stared at Gong Yimo and sneered. In your heart, you must think of me like that. Do you also think that I'm dirty? I'm a male pet. I'm a puppet. Ah, when he said this, his expression gradually calmed down and gradually became cold and ruthless. A moment of weakness flashed in his words. Gong Yimo looked at him in puzzlement. Is it important? This question. Si Wuyin couldn't help but glare at her. Since he had already asked, how could this question not be important? Gong Yimo frowned. Since you think it's important, I'll tell you what I really think. She glanced at Si Wuyin's expression. He didn't show it on his face, but he was listening intently. He really cared about her. Dong Luani has taken good care of herself. She's pretty and has a great figure. She's not that much older than you. Is it really that disgusting that she forced herself on you? She asked in a low voice. He was Dong Luani's adopted son. They were not related by blood. Was it so unacceptable? Gong Yimo. Si Wuyin gritted his teeth. Any man who was forced to submit to a woman would feel very indignant, all right? Was her brain stuffed with straw? Gong Yimo was startled by his roar. She dug her ears and pulled her face. Can you not be so fierce? I'm telling the truth. No matter what, it's the woman who is at a disadvantage. Is it that hard to accept that you just slept with a woman? Her way of thinking was ridiculous. Si Wuyin was about to retort angrily, but Gong Yimo spoke in a low voice. If you look down on yourself, how can others look up to you? Her words surprised Si Wuyin. He could not help but look into her eyes. Her eyes were still the same as they were 4 years ago. They were calm, tolerant, and honest. There was no deceit in them at all. A real man knows when to yield and when to stand tall. As the emperor, your name will definitely go down in history. What will be remembered by the future generations is your actions and your character. When you were on the throne, did you contribute to the country and the people? That's the most important thing. As for those who are concubines or not, those are just unofficial records. Gong Yimo looked at him with disappointment. As long as you do good things, the world will remember your achievements. Unless you don't do anything, then you will be despised. In life, the most important thing is to have a clear conscience. Those who only look at your past, talk about your right and wrong, deny your efforts, and despise you are all despicable people. These kinds of people can't be used, so why care about them? When you have the ability, you can directly change the history books. At that time, will anyone stop you? Of course, the prerequisite is that you have the ability. Those who only look at your past, talk about your right and wrong, deny your efforts, and despise you. Shouldn't you care? Si Wuyin was silent for a long time before he suddenly smiled. His dazzling red clothes seemed to have a flowing light, but all of this couldn't compare to his smile. Everything in the world, could it be that people were trapped in their own cocoons? Gong Yimo, you really know how to comfort people. He laughed in a low voice. His smile came from his heart, but the words he said made people angry. But no matter how good you are at talking, I won't give you the antidote. Gong Yimo rolled her eyes at the sky. It didn't matter. She wasn't poisoned anyway. She just saw that his wound had stopped bleeding, but because he was too excited, he lost a lot of blood, so she kindly reminded him, "Aren't you going to apply some medicine?" Si Weiyan didn't care. He had suffered this kind of injury many times before. Every time he did something wrong, the Empress Dowager would use him to test medicine. The process must be painful, so he was already used to it. Gong Yimo reached out to poke his wound. The sudden pain made him take in a cold breath, and he instantly looked at her with a cold expression. "Gong Yimo, do you believe that I won't poison your hand?" Seeing his face scrunch up in pain, she couldn't endure it. Gong Yimo chuckled, and the whole carriage seemed to be filled with spring flowers, warm and sweet. Si Weiyan's face was cold, but he didn't know why. But when he saw Gong Yimo's smug look after her successful prank, he couldn't get angry. She was like the spring sunshine, calm and relaxed, while he was surrounded by a dark night that couldn't be dissolved. In theory, he should hate Gong Yimo, but in reality, he wanted to be close to her, just like he wanted to be close to light. No, this wasn't right. Si Weiyan coldly looked at Gong Yimo, who was looking for medicine, and secretly thought, this kind of person who would affect his mind, you should just poison her to death, right? Gong Dai found a few people from the Shui clan to test it out. He found that on this incomplete map, only pure blood from the Shui clan could show the lines. He was half happy and half worried. This was the first time he felt worried. The result was clearly in front of him, but he seemed to have lost the courage to test it out. He was afraid that he would be happy for nothing. At this time, Lo Chi sent a letter. It was from Yu Chi. Gong Dai had many people under Yu Chi. They only had one mission right now, and that was to find out news about the royal sister. Opening it, it was indeed about the royal sister. Gong Dai's lips revealed a smile, but that smile gradually froze, and his face turned green. The royal sister actually had a man by her side? Who the hell was Bai Chio? Seeing His Highness push the wheelchair out, Lo Chi shouted in confusion. "Your Highness, where are you going?" "Yu Chi." Gong Dai gritted his teeth. Lo Chi was stunned. His Highness' poison hadn't been cured yet, so he asked nervously, "Why are you going to Yu Chi now?" Gong Dai didn't answer. It didn't seem right to say that he caught them in the act. Thinking of this, Gong Dai's face became even scarier. Chapter 465. After Lo Chi left, Gong Dai looked at the map that was filled with markings and fell into deep thought. In the past few days, he had roughly decided on the route of the national road. Because of the official road as the foundation, the route was quite clear. He had also sent a team out to survey the terrain. The construction of the road had officially begun. This work was not complicated. If he left it to Lo Chi, he should be able to do it well. Gong Dai flipped through the account books again. Every month, he did not need to look through many account books. They were all general accounts. Right now, he had more than 1,000 banks and 3,000 shops under his name. Not to mention the fields and manors, the amount of account books that he needed to look through every month piled up like a mountain. It was a good thing that Gong Dai used the addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division method that Gong Yimo taught him. He also used Arabic numerals. Otherwise, it would not just be a mountain, it would be several mountains. These account books were specially calculated by Gong Dai's subordinates. After the numbers were changed, no one could understand them. Then, it was reported to the higher-ups and reduced layer by layer. When it reached Gong Dai's hands, there were only about 10 books left. It was not a big deal that each book was thicker than copper coin. Bai Sheng had to look through hundreds of books in a month. The thickness was even more shocking. Gong Dai flipped through a few books. He just patiently looked at them. There was no other way. The royal sister did not like to look at these. So when he was young, he felt sorry for the royal sister and learned arithmetic early. But after he learned how to look at accounts, the royal sister never touched the account books again. She really trusted him. Why did he feel a little sad? Because he missed the royal sister. He missed her so much. During this time, he did not dare to think too deeply about her past. The moment they met, he would personally confirm it. But now he just purely missed her. He missed her a lot. Gong Dai sighed. In the end, he held the account books and thought, what if he gave all this work to Bai Sheng? The more he thought about it, the more he felt it was a good idea. What to do? Bai Sheng, who was bent over the table looking at the account books, suddenly sneezed. He looked at the nearly 100 account books beside him and then pinched his cheeks that were becoming thinner by the day. He wondered if he should ask for sick leave and let Wang Yi look at the account books himself. After receiving the letter from Long City and knowing that Gong Dai was fine, Gong Yimo heaved a sigh of relief. However, she felt that Gong Dai was a little strange. In the past, when he replied to her letters, his words were just like his personality. There was a faint gentleness in his coldness. However, this time, she clearly felt that he was suppressing something. Could it be that something had happened to him that he didn't want her to know? Gong Yimo wondered if he had been poisoned. She couldn't help but glare at Si Wuyan. You really made the Snow Clan stop. Si Wuyan saw that she was suspecting him, and his eyes flashed with hostility. Gong Yimo, are you saying that I'm faking it? Gong Yimo rubbed her nose. Why was he so angry? She was just asking. Si Wuyan frowned. He himself didn't understand. There were so many people who misunderstood him. Why was it that Gong Yimo misunderstood him so much that he couldn't accept it? So he angrily lowered his head and didn't say anything. Gong Yimo saw that he was silent and glanced at him. Si Wuyan, who was wearing a dragon robe, looked awkward no matter how one looked at him. He was filled with hostility, especially when he was reading the booklets. In the end, he would throw away every booklet he read. His gloomy anger was burning in the entire Yuhua Palace. Gong Yimo picked up a book from the ground and looked at it. She found that it was an impeachment report. It was reasonable and didn't seem to be slandering. However, since Si Wuyan was so angry, it was obvious that this impeachment report was about someone from their camp. Voila! He suddenly waved his hand and swept all the memorials to the ground. That handsome face under the purple gold crown was distorted. The anger in his heart was probably going to burn his eyebrows. What's going on? Gong Yimo bent down to pick up another memorials. The contents were more or less the same. These people, they are in the position, but they don't think about their duties. They only know how to flatter the Empress Dowager and be her dog. Gong Yimo stared at the memorials and didn't even raise her head. Are you jealous? You also want a dog that will hit whoever you want, don't you? Si Wuyan glared at her. After a while, he said, I don't want a dog. I want capable people. This world can't be occupied by those lackeys who only care about chasing after their instincts. Those bastards will eventually become my foundation cushion. As he said this, he thought of something. He suppressed his anger and picked up the cinnabar brush again to continue marking. Because these memorials also had important matters, but when it came to him, they were all trivial matters. However, he still seriously marked them down and issued orders to carry them out. Gong Yimo had been watching coldly during this period of time. She found that Si Wuyan still had some ambition and his heart could be considered upright. Just like the Empress Dowager, she never looked at the memorials when they were in her hands. Instead, she gave them to one of her male companions called Lan Si. Therefore, from a certain point of view, Lan Si had a higher status than Si Wuyan. Time passed quickly. Gong Yimo read while Si Wuyan marked memorials. When he finished his work, he saw Gong Yimo, who was engrossed in reading. In her hands was an ancient book that was as thick as a brick. Although he didn't know what it was about, it didn't look very interesting. At this time, he was slightly moved. He felt that Gong Yimo's ability to reach where she was today was inseparable from her eagerness to learn. She was clearly young, but when she read, she gave people a sense of silence, as if she had read a lot. Time flew by, and she seemed to have stopped outside. Being stared at by Si Wuyan like this, Gong Yimo closed the book in her hands and asked in puzzlement, What's wrong? Si Wuyan's originally calm face suddenly became fierce. He seemed to always be like this, baring his fangs and brandishing his claws at all times, as if he was afraid that others would think that he was easy to bully. Why? I just think that you're a useless woman. You're so useless. Should I give you the antidote? He raised his eyebrows and smiled wickedly, waiting for Gong Yimo to get angry. Unexpectedly, Gong Yimo looked at the book in her hands. then looked at him and suddenly laughed. Si Wuyin, are you feeling inferior? Si Wuyin instantly exploded. Gong Yimo, don't think that I don't dare to kill you. At most, we'll fight to the death. Gong Yimo giggled. I just saw that there were mistakes in the booklets that you were reading. Si Wuyin saw that they were making trouble out of nothing in those booklets just now and couldn't help but scold them with a cinnabar pen. That was why Gong Yimo saw it. Hearing this, Si Wuyin's face turned red. He was so ashamed that he wanted to die. Gong Yimo watched his handsome face turn red, then purple, and finally calmed down a little. He sneered. Yes, my literacy is limited. So what? Who said that an emperor had to be knowledgeable? Wouldn't it be better to be like his imperial mother, who knew how to use people? Gong Yimo giggled as she walked forward and sat beside Si Wuyin's desk. Because I'm afraid that you'll say that I'm useless, and I'll teach you how to read in the future. Si Wuyin snorted. No need. If you have the time, why don't you help me think of a way to make a comeback? He was naturally intelligent, but the Empress Dowager was afraid of nurturing a tiger. So not only did she destroy his meridians so that he couldn't practice martial arts, she also forbade him from studying. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.